Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to the policy meeting, and it is 6:32-ish. So attending tonight's meeting, school board member Ms. Horn, Sue Horn?
Whatever.
Sorry. President Pickle
Don't say whatever, I
Antonio,
don't.
Kara Coates, myself, and Daphne Moore, Vice President Daphne Moore. So so the agenda for this evening, we are going to review 10 policies. And then we're going to have our open discussion on House Bill 322, 327, and 616. I did want to start with a short, quick announcement that tonight we're having the visual art exhibit downstairs on the second floor. It will be running through sometime in May. There are several award-winning exhibit pieces. And so I'm going to pass around these flyers for anyone who wants to attend. They also have food. They're trying to get you out of policy. So here's that. Thank you. There's amazing artwork down there. Really proud of our students and their teachers and everyone. So I believe we're going to start. First off is policy 2271. And this is the College Credit Plus program policy. This policy was reviewed by Ms. Holloman, Tia Holloman, and it is a reinstatement, registering with selective service, and it's talking. Is Tia here? No.
Okay.
All right. So
There's two changes.
The failure to felony. Daphne understands it better than me, to be honest.
What's that?
So the in green, the selective service addition, and then on the next page, so that's a thing that Tia recommends adding, I think, and then Tia Holman's our curriculum director, and she and Jason Bates oversee this program. And then on page 2 of 4, she's added maintaining a 3-point cumulative GPA or higher, or earning a B or higher in coursework similar to a College Credit Plus class.
Right, so the reinstatement standards are going to be set that to be reinstated to the College Credit Plus program, you're going to have to maintain a 3.0 GPA or higher, earning a B or higher in the coursework, similar to the College Credit Plus course.
Just so people may not be familiar with College Credit Plus is, but it's a course that you can take at Columbus State or OSU or another college that allows you to get college credit and high school credit simultaneously.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Steve.
I just had one question on that. On the one that's active, I think it says it all students enrolled in grades 6 through 11, but in this one, it says 7th through 12th. Is it just the timing of what they need to be when they're considering?
I mean, it's just more of a practicality. We do have 7th graders that are gifted that can take that level, and probably even some 6th graders, but it's, I think the change was, I don't think we've ever had a 6th grader do it.
That's what I wondered. Or if it just is in the 6th grade, they're made aware of it. So for 7th grade, they would know about it.
Right.
Okay.
And then it's also requiring male students who are 18 or older to register with selective service in order to participate in the College Credit Plus. So Ms. Holman reviewed it, made the recommendation to update that. We also have language updating that Neola has recommended throughout the dismissal, where it says his, her, his, her, his, her. We're gonna change it to say the student or they so that it's applicable to everyone. I did have a question about item B on page 3. At the very end, the last sentence says the board shall be required to pay for such courses. Oh, Daphne and I had, okay, Daphne says it should be pay. I wondered, should it be authorized, but we're paying.
We are paying, and that is not up to us.
That makes me nervous. Okay. So the
Yeah.
board pays. Okay. So we're responsible. Okay. Anything else? All right. Item number 2, dress and grooming policy 5511. And Mr. Barrett reviewed this. And optional language has been added to state what is legally required. And as far as the dress code, and language is an option. As far as the implementation of such measures required in accordance to stated principles. And this is also to comply with Title 9 of Title 7.
Steve, did you think there were really any substantial changes? I mean,
Not really,
just, I think cleaning up some of the wording.
right.
Making it gender neutral, I think was the purpose of A and D on the first page. And directing it at the building level. Right.
Right. Principal's the arbiter of educational, of deciding something is inappropriate. Yeah. Do you have the policy? Can you see it?
I can't see the board, so.
Okay. Yeah, so I just said that it says that the principal is the arbiter of the dress code. If it's inappropriate, then the principal makes the decision based on the policy.
What was the language that was added? There's a change in this one, right? What was the language that was added?
It's in green there. So I'll show you this.
Let me read it out.
Yes. So the green is what is being added, right?
That's right.
And before this was added, what was already there was in black and red, or is red being taken out?
Red's being taken out. Green's being added.
Okay, so when you made this decision,
I did.
you made the decision to add what's in green?
I did.
Is the board done discussing this policy? So I think we
Do we have more
just, I know
discussion?
we've got a lot of
Yeah.
people who are not typically here with us for committee meetings, but we will certainly open it up for comments from the community after the board has finished having our discussion about these policies. This is a board discussion about the policies, and we are inviting you to attend and participate in that dialogue with us, but we need to have our discussion about the policies before we open it up.
And because of the art show downstairs, we all are gonna have to project our
Yeah.
voices.
Yeah, 'cause it's loud.
because I struggle to hear on a good day. Oh, that might be a good
That might be
idea.
good, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, considering today.
And after the board's finished having our dialogue about it, we will,
we'll
as I
open
just
it up.
said, yeah, we will open it up for comments and questions, but we need to finish digesting the recommendations first. Correct. Yes, after each policy. We are not voting on anything tonight either.
Okay.
Sorry, like I said, I know there's a lot of new people to our committee meeting tonight. And
Thank
we are grateful to have you here with us as we have this dialogue, but we've got to be able to have our own dialogue.
I get the
And
gist
then-
of what you're saying.
yeah.
I don't know all that.
All right, so the next item for policy
I
57.
think we're still,
Oh, with,
did we
Yeah.
finish?
I don't think so yet. So,
oh, dress code.
yes.
All
we're
right,
still
we have
on this
more.
policy. Were there other questions or comments or anything else related to the recommended changes? From board. And then you can open it up if there's other.
So it's just important to know that this policy is supported by the dress code, which is established as an administrative guideline. So it's not, it doesn't have a lot of specifics in it because it is the broader policy under which the administrative code is prepared.
Right.
During orientation, everyone gets the dress code in the handbook. This policy was last revised in 2019. So a lot of the policies that we're going through just need a revision or updating for the current times.
Mr. Barrett, maybe you can explain, because we do have new board members too.
Yeah.
So the board sets the policy, and then specific to the dress code, the policy designates each building principal. I don't want to
Yeah.
explain for you.
So the board, we review policies, we make recommendations to the board, and
The actual dress code is set, each building principal.
each building principal sets the dress code, but we had a K-12 review of the dress code, and it was updated very recently. And so each elementary school, each middle school, and the high school has specific versions of it. So the dress code at middle school east and south and west are the same, and our elementaries are the same.
And then this is the policy that those dress codes are developed from. So it sounds like our
Right.
policy wasn't maybe updated to reflect.
It wasn't updated to reflect what we were actually doing, so.
I'm not the chair, sorry.
Yeah.
Dan, you've got
No,
people from
it's okay,
around
I'm
that go
learning,
behind you
so-
too that have questions.
All right. Right now,
Yeah.
all right.
Yes.
Angela?
So I'm just wondering when it says students have the right to dress in accordance with their gender identity within a constraint to the dress code promulgated by the school. I'm not, from what I remember about the dress code, I don't understand why that distinction needs to be made. And what are the differences between the male and female versions of the dress code? I mean, I remember like no tank tops, no, short skirts and shorts and things like that, but do you have an idea, like, what is the difference between the male and female versions of the dress?
I think it's pretty clear. It's based on the gender identity of the person. So they dress according to how they identify.
Well, no, but I mean, like, what are the issues, like, if it's short shorts, it shouldn't matter whether it's a male or a female, they should not be wearing shorts that are a certain shortness, or whether if it's tank tops, then a male or a female shouldn't be wearing.
So I'm
tank
not,
tops.
I guess I'm a little confused about
She's
how
talking
you're,
about the actual dress code, not the policy.
okay.
But why include that? I mean, I just.
Because we think it's important
She's
to,
asking why
Why
you're
the
recommending
policy.
that sentence at the bottom of the. first
because we
paragraph.
want to affirm people's identity. And we want them to choose to dress in a way that fits with their identity.
Well, from my understanding, though, the dress codes are more about public decency, not about your gender identity. Like, the dress code doesn't say girls shall wear skirts, or boys shall wear, like, it doesn't say that. It's more about public decency. So why attach gender to it to show value?
Yeah, it's an affirmation. It shows value.
But you're not telling girls to dress a certain way, boys.
I am not, That's
so
right.
Why are you saying gender identity?
because I think it's important to affirm one's gender or identity.
I think we're talking
I don't think we are. I'm being very clear. That's
I'm
why
not
it's written the
saying
way it's
boys
written.
should dress a certain way. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying people shouldn't dress how they want. I'm saying I
Okay.
thought dress codes were about public decency, whether it's a male or a female. Or however they-
So how do you define public decency?
Length of shorts, covering your body.
Based on what?
Covering your body.
Okay,
So I think that the sentence, and I don't want to speak for you, but as I read the sentence, the necessity for adding that sentence would be so that a student is not told that they're not dressed appropriately if there's an adult who doesn't think that they're dressed in a way that matches what they believe their gender to be. So that the purpose of
Like
that
a boy wearing a
sentence
dress.
is to make it clear
That's not part of the dress code.
that it is up to the student.
That's not part of the dress code.
Correct.
So why are you adding?
I don't think this is about the dress code. I think
There's,
It's
it's
the
about
What it says.
It's the policy.
policy, it's the policy.
It is making it clear that the policy of this district is that students are permitted to wear the clothes that they choose to wear that matches what they believe their identity
I understand
to be.
that. I understand that. I'm saying my understanding of the dress code is more about covering one's body, whether it's male or
Sure.
female, no matter what they express. So I don't understand why you're attaching gender identity to it. I'll just leave my comment at that. That's just. the point.
Sure.
all right, so we have some hands. Go ahead.
I just have a procedural question, because this is all new. When the board is discussing it, as they should, and I hear questions, that's great. Am I to assume that the language is going to be finalized as this conversation happens?
So procedurally, the way that our committees, specifically policy committee works is that the board has an open discussion about recommended changes. Sometimes during that discussion, the board decides that we want to make additional changes or not accept recommendations. And depending on, we don't vote on policy at policy committee. Anything that we want to change that's different from what's in front of us, that will go back to the administration, either to make the changes that we've discussed making or to delete the recommendations that we don't agree with. They will come to a regular board meeting agenda though.
That answers my question.
Sometimes the following month, usually the following month for the board to vote.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then just to also be clear, at those regular board meetings, there's always a section for public participation. So once the final draft of a policy is, I'm just going to repeat myself, once there is a final draft of a policy and it's on a board agenda, if community members have additional comments to make, they can make those during public participation at the board meeting before we vote.
Thank you for your time.
Sure.
So I have a question. Your part, the X, the green X, where it says a reasonable dress code. I have middle schoolers and I know that there's, a dress code written up, but I drop off and pick up every day. And I've had the discussion with my children. I feel like it's pretty loose. Whereas, when I pick up in the spring and, the beginning of the school year, and I see what I deem inappropriate, like the bottom of a butt or 5 inches of a stomach and, shirts that are barely covering the top, regardless of your gender. And I ask my children about it. They're like, oh, there's really not any dress code anyway. They'll say they get slapped on the wrist for wearing it, but then the next day I see the same child wearing the same shorts getting out of the car. So, are we actually holding, if we're gonna have a dress code, are we enforcing it?
So this, again, is not a discussion about the dress code
Right, but
itself.
it says a reasonable dress code.
Right.
So
So
do we have an actual reasonable dress code?
yeah, that would be, I don't know, I don't remember. The dress codes themselves are in the student handbooks,
Right.
which are also
Right.
something that is approved by the board.
Right.
So probably if if there are questions about actual dress codes rather than questions about the policy
Well, it's not so much the question about the dress
She's
code, 'cause I know what it
questioning
is. Are
enforcement.
we actually enforcing
of the
it?
code or the policy.
The code.
So that would be a
Public
different
comment.
It's a
conversation.
different conversation. So
Okay, well, again,
you're
Just
saying
my
we
2
have a
cents.
dress code, but you're saying we don't enforce
need
it
it.
well enough, in your opinion?
not in my opinion, the child, I could see their entire bottom half. My children said they were talked to about it. The next day, the same child wore the same pair of shorts.
Right.
So,
All right, well, thank you for bringing up your opinion, your experience.
I mean, I just
And
wanted to,
that's,
it's a distraction to students. I
Right.
mean, I was
Okay.
so taken
Okay.
back by it,
okay,
so.
Yeah, so one, those codes, since they are at the building level, that's probably a conversation at a building level with
principal.
the principal.
But the principal's not the one that
Enforces
makes the
the
code,
dress
though.
code, yeah.
who enforces it, but not
You-
makes it.
Well,
That's
the-
not quite true. The principals were on the committee. Mr. Barboza at the middle school east was part of the committee to create the code.
so
I have a couple
one more
questions.
comment.
Yeah, first of all, did you say the last time it was revised was 2019? Did you say? Is that correct?
Mhm.
And then I thought also I heard, that actually the school dress, are we calling this a code or a policy?
This is a
Policy.
policy.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not the dress code. We do have a dress code.
Okay, so did I hear you say that really with the changes, the changes that they're in the policy that is being suggested have really already been implemented for a number of years in the different buildings? Did I hear you say that?
No, I'm saying that sometimes policy, in this case, lag behind the changes in the dress code, which is in the student code of conduct. The reason we instituted these policy committee meetings, can everybody hear me? In 2016 is the district, when I came here in August of 2016, was really behind in policies. So we decided to develop a committee so that we could discuss these in a public forum, get input from folks, but also do the work together and communicate the changes we were making. And so this was updated, 3 years after that in 2019, and now we're updating it again.
Okay. Just one more comment. I don't know why the Gahanna district here and the leadership wants to be the Pied Piper to lead our kids into sin.
Pied Piper for
What's-
what?
The Pied
Lead our
Piper
kids
to
into
lead our
sin.
kids into sinning. To sin. This is sin. Gender. It's no wonder our kids are helpless and hopeless and there's.
This is really honestly off topic.
Oh,
Yeah.
from what we're
okay, it's,
discussing.
no, it was a comment I made and then they wanted, all I was doing was make a comment and then they wanted to pipe in and ask me to explain it, so. But
All
that's my comment. I don't know why the school district wants to lead our kids. It's like you're just a Pied Piper leading them into sin.
No
All
one's
right, you're
leading-
entitled to
No one's,
Sharon.
no one's leading them into sin.
That's sin.
And that's not an inclusive conversation and we are going off topic.
I can
All right,
say that's sin.
actually, okay, thank you. Anyone else want to say anything? We're trying to move along. All right. Thank you, Kara. And next, at 7 o'clock, it is policy numbers 5772 on weapons. And so Steve reviewed this policy, Mr. Barrett reviewed this policy, and it is revised to include the most recent definition of weapon, to include the, I don't even know how to say it,
Incendiary
Thank you.
devices. Yeah.
explosives and other objects defined as dangerous ordinances under state law. You'll see the green and the red again. And Steve, did you have anything you wanted to expand? I like the,
No, I don't
I
have
like the
anything.
additional detail.
So the major change is in green is incendiary devices, explosives, and other objects defined as dangerous ordinance under state law. And then we checked boxes A, items pre-approved by building principal as part of the class or individual presentation under adult supervision. If used for purposes and in the manner approved, working firearms, any ammunition will never be approved as part of the presentation. So let's say a student was doing a presentation on the Civil War and they had a replica, the principal would maybe approve or not, allowing the student to bring that into a classroom. The second in B is theatrical props used in appropriate settings. And then the next box that we checked is students shall report any information concerning weapons and or threats of violence by students, staff members, or visitors to the principal, student resource officer, or teacher. Failure to report such information may be subject to student disciplinary action.
The only change was really the expansion of the devices,
Right.
right? Because the other boxes we had checked in our previous.
Yeah, I'm not sure we had all three of those in the second one, but maybe we did. So that's it.
And the policy is published annually in all the handbooks for staff and students.
So this is not,
Okay,
not necessarily published. I mean, it is in the student code of
Printed.
conduct weapon
right.
policy, but not the full.
Why do we say that then?
It does on the bottom.
I think it is actually.
Yeah, I think it is actually in the code.
Yeah.
Is our handbook,
Here,
it's
I got
not
it.
published
Yeah, that's
or
The-
it's printed.
The staff,
Published on the.
is it in
On
the
the
staff,
website.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is published.
Yeah.
in the staff handbook?
It says staff and
Oh, I'm sorry.
And everyone has to
student
sign.
and staff, yeah.
Is it? I'm asking, is
No.
it actually published in the staff handbook?
It
I think
is.
we have staff.
As of
participating.
yet, it is not.
So we probably
need
either
to
need
do
to
it.
do that or adjust the policy.
No, I think we need to do it.
Maybe a bad idea, just to have it all the way through.
So we'll, before we put this on the agenda. we'll make sure
Okay.
we have
Any other discussion? Next, we're going to policy 6110, grant
I think
funds.
you've got someone.
Oh,
I
I'm
was just
sorry.
gonna ask if we could repeat what we were adding.
Yeah.
To before the next go around, like, what were you guys changing before, what it was, yeah.
Well, the change is the expansion to include incendiary devices, explosive, and other objects as defined. The other ones were in the previous version of the policy that's currently in effect. And at the bottom, it says it will be published in student and staff handbooks. And so while we know it's included in student, they're going to verify that it's in staff and add it before we vote at a board meeting.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
That we actually knew what our policy says.
Good catch there. All right, so grant funds 6110.
Talk about dry.
This one's really dry.
We don't joke about money at it. All right,
These are not exciting.
No, they are not.
all right. So Mr. Goodyear reviewed this policy and would you like to expand?
The grant fund piece really just affirms that, you know, one of the pieces in here is any grant proposals that
You're
we
gonna
have.
have to use this because I can't
Oh,
really hear you.
She wants treasure on microphone.
It's a little quiet, you'll have to speak up into it.
You can put it pretty close.
That one works. They told me to turn it on yet, so maybe I'm loud enough.
Yeah, so this is
You
just
can
saying,
read your lips.
Oh, that's.
at the bottom of page 1, you'll just see that it does say that the superintendent shall present proposals to the board. So we had one at the last board meeting. I think we had like a $250 robotics grant from one of the schools. anytime we have a grant proposal, we will bring those to the board for approval. That's what this one says, regardless of the amount. Obviously, $250, small grant, we're still bringing those to the board for approval. On page 2, we're including language around maintenance of effort and maintenance of equity. These are around making sure that we're spending the same amount of money that we did in previous years for services for special education students. So MOE, MO, I guess, both MOE, then MOEQ was the maintenance of equity piece. It's just stating that we will meet those in accordance. We're going to follow those and make sure that we're doing that. The other piece in F, we're adding the superintendent's authorized to sign related documents for grant administration, including documents once the board approves a grant, all the administrative stuff, all the paperwork that goes behind that. Steve and I'll take care of the signatures for that so we can get those followed through and get those moving. The other piece, it does allow us to terminate grants if the funding ceases to exist, which just it makes sense. You know, funding's there. We're not going to continue to do these things if the money doesn't follow along with it. That is, those are the rest of the changes. Staff was
And
pretty
that
straightforward, pretty
MOE
dry.
part, the MOE part, was that driven by federal change?
Those, I think it's just putting it in there. Maintenance of effort has been there for a while.
Oh.
It's always existed, so it's nothing new. We're just putting in here, just stating that we're going to adhere to that, which we have.
We've been abiding by it. It's
Correct.
just not been
Yes.
part of the
Yep, it's just,
policy.
we're just putting it in there just
So we're
just to show
documenting
that.
as
Correct.
part of the policy. I think that's a good practice. I don't have any other questions on that one.
Thank you, Scott. And next we have policy 6114, and that's spending federal funds. Yeah, keep your mic. So these are per Neola and required updates, and you reviewed it.
Correct. Yes. One just includes with use of federal funds that includes the prohibitions regarding costs incurred for telecommunication and video surveillance services and equipment. And the other piece is the federal funded contracts in excess of $2,000 related to construction, alteration, repairs, painting, decorating, etc. must comply with the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements. We have no choice but to do those. It's the law.
I was just curious what Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirement is.
If we're doing that, that sets the amounts that we must pay for
Okay.
the services. It really takes that out there. They're higher costs.
Okay.
But to do that, if we use federal funds to do these things, it will drive the costs up that we have to pay.
So if we did HVAC with ESSER funds, we would have to hire the company at those wages, right?
Correct.
I'm there.
Again, they're kind of federally mandated changes. We don't have a lot of,
And we just need to
No.
make sure we're in accordance with the law.
we have to be in
Correct.
compliance,
Yes.
right?
And next is policy 6325, and that's procurement, federal grants funds.
On page 1, again, another reference to all federally funded contracts adhering to the Davis-Bacon prevailing wage requirements. So same thing we just talked about, just adding that to this policy as well.
Okay.
Page 2 talks about pre-qualified lists of persons to get on to be able to bid. We're just saying that we're going to allow that to happen periodically. So as we see those, we're going to continually keep those updated. We do put in we go up to the limits for what the purchase allowances are. So for micro purchases, an acquisition of supplies or services, the aggregate dollar amount, which does not exceed $10,000, we're allowed to use that. Small purchases is up to 250,000, and that is also the same number that we use in for the sealed bids. We're able to use that piece there. We did at the bottom of page 3, we had the option to say exactly how many bids we needed, or if we just had an adequate number, we're there. So we chose the adequate number. We didn't want to tie our hands to say we have to have 10 and we get 7.
Especially right now.
Especially right now,
we might not
We're gonna,
get that
we're gonna
many
make sure that
bids.
we go through that evaluation piece to make sure that that's the lowest, most responsible, reasonable bids. As opposed to going, well, we only got 7 of 10. This way it gives us the flexibility we need to administer that. Page 6, a lot of pages, but very little changes to those, just keeping us in compliance.
All right, great. Staying ahead of
Yes.
the changes with the times. All right, so 63.5.
That one, I don't think it's ready to go to the board, right?
Yeah.
I can't, sorry, Sam's got it, he's chair.
When it says an adequate number of bids, is that ever one, or should it be at least 2?
It gives the administration the right to determine if we only get one bidder, if we're comfortable with that, that's something we'd be able to bring that to the board for approval.
As a practice, we try to get 3, but right now it's very difficult because everybody's got so much work that they're not even bidding for, or they don't feel that they can get the supplies to do a job. So we've had, to accept 2 and sometimes, but our goal would be to have competitive bidding. And I asked that as a board member,
Right.
as we're, conducting business. So yeah.
Yeah, my concern was. just that
Adequate's hard to define, right? It
if
doesn't really,
we're at least attempting to
yes,
try to get at least 2 or 3.
yes, as a practice we are.
Okay, but it says that you can choose any number, which could be 1. The change is that it could be any number, which could be 1, and I'm just suggesting that an attempt to be made at least to get 2.
And yeah,
Clarify
as a
that
practice, we always try to get more than one.
Yeah, I understand that,
It's
understand the
just
wording,
smart business.
for the wording to say that, that's all.
Okay, thanks.
Next, we have use of credit cards, policy 6423. And
Scott's got that one too. He's gonna talk about it.
all right, yeah, Mr. Gooding reviewed it. I was just gonna go.
We have a lot of additions here. We're actually making sure that we have reference written procedures that we have that will be spelled out in the administrative guidelines. So on page 1, you'll see that it identifies my position, the treasurer responsible for the issuance, reissuance, cancellation of credit cards. We will maintain written procedures, and we track everything through the records there. It does state that all officers, employees are required to immediately report lost or stolen credit cards to their immediate supervisor and to my office. Then we will go ahead and cancel those. Page 2 is we select an option says, so what we will do after the policy is approved, which will be a little off this language, but it talks about the sum of all credit card accounts. So we're going to come to the board in the following meeting and say, we are going to have issued credit cards up to a certain dollar amount. What we'll do going forward and to stay with the policy is we're going to add that as part of the resolutions that we do at the organization meeting
Okay.
in January every year. So I want to go ahead and still do it now, even though it's not the organizational meeting, to follow it. It's a little off cycle to get it caught up. Do that now, and then we'll do that every January as part of the organization.
That's a great idea.
It talks about what things can be used for. So transportation reservations, expenses, conferences, hotel reservations, reasonable meal expenses. And we did include a maximum gratuity of 20%, obviously excluding alcoholic beverages, of course. Purchases from vendors who do not accept purchase orders, which we've seen an increase on that. Safety and security reasons connected with the student field trip, competition or other activity, or other purchases is the kind of catch-all other purchases approved by me on a case-by-case basis if there's an emergency of some sort that we have to be nimble and be able to respond to that. And a lot of notification piece here. We did select option on page 2 that I retain general possession and control of the credit card accounts related to those, so that those are all secured, so that they're not just floating around that anybody can get access to. These things are lock and key. We do talk that we selected the both, that it was the superintendent and treasurer will develop administrative guidelines that will go out to staff that will be followed. Those are the procedures and processes everyone's going to follow. We spell out that in order to request a credit, the use of a credit card, they have to tell us when it's needed, the date it's going to be returned, their employee name and signature, valid purchase order number, employee phone number, in case we need to get a hold of everybody. We've got every piece of information that we need to identify who that person is when it's signed out. On receipt, the employees, and then we selected all the options here that they'll inform the merchants that it's official school district business, so that we're tax exempt, so that they won't charge us for tax. They'll maintain credit cards in a secure fashion, prevent unauthorized charges. They'll use reasonable care when making purchases online. They will refrain from providing the credit card number to unknown online merchants. They will maintain sufficient documentation, provide documentation of all purchases to the, and it's a title, credit card compliance officer. That is an individual in my office. We didn't want to put their specific name in the event that it changes. We don't have to come back and change the policy. So there is somebody in my office that is affiliated with that job title. Refrain from allowing anybody else to use a credit card other than the person that signed it out. They're not allowed to split costs on of an invoice to get around credit card processes to avoid dollar amounts that we have established. They can't split it up that way. The employee is liable for anything that is not provided with an itemized receipt. Talks about that they must return the credit cards within a certain amount of days to the credit card compliance officer. Anything that's not, the employee is responsible for any and all unrelated or unsubstantiated purchases and must make full reimbursement to the district within 30 business days. Then we get into any and all reviews of payment for the bills to the credit card company are compiled by the credit card compliance officer and are reviewed by the assistant treasurer. So we've got that internal control piece that people processing it are not the ones that they're not the only ones that have their eyes on it. We've got multiple eyes on this to make sure it goes through a lot of vetting and approval process. Then the credit card compliance officer will monitor the accounts and reconcile those on a monthly basis, which again go through the assistant treasurer. We have multiple eyes and approval processes on that one. I think of all the ones we had, this one had the most changes, but credit cards are yes, it's tight.
It all sounds reasonable and looks pretty concise, and appreciate the thoroughness. Any discussion on credit cards?
Glad you're putting all the controls in place.
Yeah.
That's a very good thing.
Yeah.
Policies were one of the first things
Right.
that I looked at when you hired me.
Credit cards, Tony.
So when you look at the budget of our district, credit cards being ran, are those itemized in the budget? Or are they grouped under one category of credit cards?
It would depend on the type of service that it's being used for. So it's all within the budget. So any expense that goes on a credit card goes through our ledger. But it will show up differently depending on the type of what I'm saying, like the type of expense. So if it's a travel or conference, it's going to show up as a purchase services. If it was microphones, it's going to show up as a supply. So it depends on the type of service that's being, the product or service that's being purchased using the credit card.
Your officer will categorize them.
So when we get those back, get the receipts, that's how they all get charged out once those come back in and reconcile. Yes.
behind,
Quick question. So am I understanding that credit cards aren't issued specifically to a person? Like, but if I need it for something, I can like check it out. Is that?
We have both. So there are some that are issued to a specific district's name with an employee's name on it. But there are also district-wide credit cards that if somebody needed, that they would have to sign that out.
Okay.
All of them have to be signed out, and still have to go through the same process.
Okay, and the policy, does that lay that out, or is that more of a handbook?
Those will be
thing?
listed in the administrative guidelines, who those are, who those are.
Just out of curiosity, using the credit cards, or do you like go through a research process to find the best rates and things like that, like you were talking about? Just like anything else that you did on
so he's
Because-
new, so maybe I can answer
credit
that.
cards, you know, the rates vary and whoever gives you that. That's the deal. So just-
Well,
Go ahead.
and I mean, you know, I think what is it, seventh week on the job here. Almost 2 months. I'm almost going to use double, you know, more than 1 month, plural. But obviously our intent is to get all those receipts in within the 30 days. So our goal is not to pay, the rate won't matter because we're not going to be paying interest charges on it.
Right.
So we want the stuff back, pay it, no interest, and that's the goal.
And we tend to avoid ones that accrue benefits because who should use that benefit?
Right.
So it's very vanilla, and the treasurer, 2 years ago, maybe, just looked at purchasing cards versus credit cards and did a study to make sure that we were in the right program. So we do look at it periodically. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay,
And we do have other policies, not for review tonight,
right.
that talk about, we do this because we're not allowed to let folks use their own credit cards to make reservations for things and get the points or that's illegal. So that's another policy that prevents that. So having these, using this takes that out of play.
It seems like a lot of the approval of what the purpose of the transaction is for is, with the changes is more vague now than it was before. It looks like before there was more like under, I can't scroll, but before it said you had to say what the purpose of what you were using, and if that was removed, then it said purchase order, and then like this other section talks about, we used to have a brief description of the purchase, the names of the affiliation, all that is crossed out, and it just says admin guidelines, so I'm just curious why it's becoming more, seems like it's becoming more vague, maybe I'm misreading.
It's not, because in order to have a purchase order number, all of that information must be contained on that. So they have to have the account code, they have to have the description, it has to be entered, it has to go through an approval process. All of that still has to be there before they can even try to sign it out.
Okay, I mean, are there cases where there is no purchase order, like if it's just like a lunch or something like that, or?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that has to be all done ahead of time. And those procedures will be spelled out in the administrative guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. Head on swivel. Sorry. Okay, you got thumbs up. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions on credit cards? All right, next, payroll deductions, that's 65, policy 6520. And anyone want to guess who reviewed it?
You have a complex now.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We couldn't wait for you to.
You're loving
It's
it.
okay.
It's your initiation. All right, so under payroll, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and actually looking at other districts, ours is very detailed. Some of them, it's a 2-sentence policy and that's it. So if we have everything spelled out here, my proposal is very personal because I just want to make sure that this and
Yeah.
the policy and my contract need to be in alignment.
It's a great idea.
Because the section one, the 529 piece was
Yeah.
part of it. We need to have that in
Great
there.
idea.
So we're covered. So that's there. And there was a suggestion, I think, Dion, that you had mentioned.
Yeah, Daphne wanted, Daphne brought out a
adding
question.
garnishments, and I think that's, so I've reviewed this with Michelle and payroll, and I think that's another great addition to that. So I think we've looked at, it, said, are we missing anything? And I think those two really, with what we have that's available for that, it covers everything.
That's an impressive itemization, so I will say that's thorough.
Are we adding?
So we have an O for garnishment? Is that
Yes.
what it is?
Yes.
Okay. Good catch.
Any questions about payroll deductions? No, or, all right. Yeah, it's a pretty good deal. And next will be policy 7217, and that's weapons. And let's see, Mr. Barrett or Superintendent Barrett reviewed this. And so there's some revisions,
This is for visitors.
and this
correct?
is, pardon me?
This is visitors.
Yeah,
Yes. So it's much like the 5217, I think, that we just, or,
the definition of weapons is being
5772.
updated.
Yeah.
And it's revisions of policy 1617, 3217, and 4217, based on the Ohio Supreme Court ruling. It supported 2 statutes regarding necessary training for any school staff designated by the Board of Education to carry concealed gun during the workday.
So this parallels what we just went over in 5772. The only thing we took out is the items indistinguishable from a firearm. We took that part out.
You're gonna have to be louder.
Yeah, so the only thing we took out is F under items indistinguishable from a firearm, approved by the principal. That language was a little different than the language in 5772, but pretty much everything else is the same.
So we thought, I mean, is this a policy? I thought weapons, when we reviewed it a while back, we had our legal counsel review it prior to voting on it. Is that something we should do this round too? Just
You can, sure, that doesn't hurt to do that.
comfort?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Probably not a bad idea.
So just this 57,
Well, I
57,
think any
72,
of them that are related, because they're
the
all
weapons.
driven by the statutes,
Yeah.
the statute
change.
changes,
Yeah.
right?
I guess I have was the word immediately added in the 5772 policy also? It wouldn't have been, right? Because
Where are
this
you
is the one,
speaking?
I'm sorry, in
Oh.
paragraph 3, the addition of the word immediately.
Oh.
It wouldn't have been, and I
No,
answered
'cause this
my own
is
questions
visitors.
because
Yeah.
this is visitors.
Yeah.
So my question, I guess, is what does that mean immediately?
Um,
Let me just rephrase the question because we all know what the word immediately means, I think, but I suppose I'm a little bit hesitant about the use of the word immediately.
Yeah, so instead of having that adverb, taking that out, just shall refer, because the superintendent isn't necessarily going to be the first one to
No.
know that,
Correct.
right? The SRO or somebody
Right.
else is
Yeah.
going to know, right? So, and that doesn't really reflect that at all, right?
Correct. And also,
The whole sentence doesn't reflect that.
it does not.
So maybe
So-
reword that sentence.
Yeah, I don't know about honestly that the way that paragraph is written in its
Yeah.
entirety.
So if everybody's okay with Daphne's suggestion to have her attorney
Yes.
review the weapons, so 5772 and 7217, we can have her look at that as well.
Specifically that third paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can we see the third paragraph?
it's right.
Oh, go back to page, if you don't mind.
Um,
Up,
Yeah, you're almost,
Sorry, you're being,
there it is.
right there. The
the
super,
superintendent shall.
Or it's not.
Paragraph 3.
It's moved.
It's lagging.
Look for the green immediately.
Yes.
I see it, thank you.
Yeah, so
That shouldn't be what somebody first does, right? They should be calling 911. They can cover, telling the principal or whoever's in the closest to that, not the superintendent. Might be
I'll let you guys hash that out.
Okay.
I think what I'm saying is we need some additional subject matter expertise on that paragraph before the board is evaluating whether or not that language makes sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to make sense, so, but if we take it out, we may not be compliant with the law.
Right.
So let's
Yeah.
check it out.
I think we need to have counsel. Deanna, she's.
Right. I'm just making sure our artist, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering, so how are you guys going to address open carry? Because that was signed by Governor DeWine, and I only see things about like a valid conceal like license, but you're not gonna need to get that anymore. So are you guys gonna put anything in here about open carry? I mean, it's
Talk
just
to our
an
legal
idea.
counsel. I'm not sure how that applies to schools. I know there's some school districts that allow staff, Mad River and some school districts by Dayton allow staff to carry guns. We don't allow that,
Right.
obviously. So we can ask her about open carry as well. But
I
I don't
just
think,
Didn't
I don't know if
know.
that law changed one's ability to have an open carry and have a license and then still go into a school. I'm not sure about that. I don't think so.
Right, okay.
So 7217 is going to go to
And 57.
before they, and then they'll come back to policy.
Right,
committee.
right.
Well, and you might as well just do 1617 and 3217 too, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all in that same grouping.
Oh, yeah.
We just need them to be in concert,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We don't want conflict between two.
might as well have a look at
similar
all of them.
Policies.
Right.
Any other comments or concerns? We're gonna end with food service.
Where's the food?
Second floor. Policy 8500
Bless you.
Bless you.
and this policy has been revised to include references to conflict of interest, ethics policies applying to food services procurement practice, and clarifies food milk substitute provisions. The food service supervisor has reviewed this policy and made recommendations. So it does discuss allergies and working around students' particular needs. And as far as purchasing, it's updating related policies.
Right, that's amazing.
So for food and supplies, accordance with state and federal law, USDA regulations plus board policy. So that's being updated and revised.
I didn't
So
see
that's
who
got-
had signed off on this. Did it go to our food services?
Yeah, they looked at it.
Food service,
Yeah.
yeah, the supervisor reviewed it.
So this policy has been revised to include the appropriate references to conflict of interest and ethics policies that apply to food service procurement practices and clarifies the food/milk substitution provisions. The food service supervisor has reviewed it.
So to me, the biggest change is the addition of the sentence on page 2,
Yes.
kind of the center, right? For students without disabilities who need a nutritionally equivalent milk substitute, a signed request is required by a parent or guardian.
Right.
while the request must specify the medical other dietary need, it does not have to have a medical certification, which
Right.
in the past we had required. So it's easing that request and to make it easier.
change,
They don't have to go to incur a doctor's visit to present that request for a different
Right.
dietary need. So I think that helps our families, right? And that's,
Yeah.
it's a
More
good
and more
thing
kids have that.
to be
Yeah.
doing, right? So to me, that of all of the, and we've been able to handle bad debt in other ways, so that section got cleaned up a
Right.
lot. And then, I mean, that to me is the biggest change,
Right.
right? And it's a positive one for our district.
And our families.
So I think it's ready to go to the board. Anybody else have any other opinions though?
No comments. So next, we're to discuss, we're going to start, the board will start discussing House Bill 616, 327, and 322. Daphne?
What?
Burl's gonna
I was
lead
gonna say,
it.
Burl's gonna lead it.
Burl's gonna lead it.
She
Daphne printed them out. She has them.
I'm old fashioned girl. I have to print things. I have.
So on Thursday at our regular board meeting, I introduced a draft resolution for discussion. If there's anybody who needs copies of the draft resolution,
All three.
Thank you for that, Burl.
Gina, I will share it with you.
what I am going to say is, so this is not a discussion about the legislation. It is, but this is a discussion about the resolution that I introduced at the board meeting last Thursday. So at our regular board meeting, I introduced a resolution that for the board to consider, for the board to speak in one voice about these three pieces of legislation, House Bills 322, 327, and 616. And I just, because I didn't fully explain myself on Thursday night, if it's okay with the board, I would like to explain why I introduced this resolution for us to consider, and then the board can have a discussion about the draft. So I have been, before introducing the resolution, it came after doing lots of listening and lots of thinking. I have read all three pieces of the proposed legislation. I have read sponsor testimony for the two bills that have been referred to committee and have had hearings. So that's House Bill 322 and House Bill 327. I have read proponent, opponent, and interested party testimony for House Bills 322 and 327. I have listened to hours of opponent testimony on those bills. And I have listened to the only interview that I could find with one of the bill's sponsors for House Bill 616. So I just want to be clear, there are a total of three pieces of legislation. Two of those bills, House Bill 322 and 327, were both assigned to the House State and Local Government Committee. House Bill 616 has not yet been assigned to a committee. And thus far, the bill sponsors of House Bill 616 have not been willing to give media interviews, except there was one media interview with one of the bill sponsors of 616 that I did listen to. I have also listened to members of the community who have reached out to talk about their concerns, and I have certainly read any emails that I have received. Given that House Bill 616 is now the third bill that has been introduced in the past year that would improperly and unconstitutionally try to regulate curriculum, it is my opinion that we should consider stating clearly that we are concerned about this legislation and that we should clearly explain what our concerns are. And so I will explain what my concerns are with the legislation. So first, the specific things that the bill sponsors claim that these bills are about are not actually happening in our schools. Proponents of these pieces of legislation did not identify any specific concerns with the statewide academic standards or with curriculum in any particular school district when they introduced these pieces of legislation. Instead, they have talked in broad terms about what they think might be going on inside of our schools. The fact is that if they spent just one day inside one of our Gahanna schools, they would see incredibly hardworking teachers and other staff working very hard to make sure that students are able to meet statewide academic standards. The bill sponsor of House Bill 322 stated that the goal of his piece of legislation is to prohibit indoctrination, but he provided 0 examples of indoctrination occurring in Ohio's public schools. One of the sponsors of House Bill 327 stated in sponsor testimony, quote, "We've received concerning reports that individuals are being held to an ideological test to maintain their employment or receive a good grade in a given class," end quote. But she gave 0 specific examples of this occurring in any Ohio public school. The sponsors of House Bill 616, like I said, they have not yet given sponsor testimony or been willing to talk to the media, but one of the sponsors of House Bill 616 participated in an interview last week in which she said that she introduced the legislation to prevent instruction about sexual identity and gender identity to young children, but she did not provide any examples of such instruction in our schools. Gahanna, just like most public schools, has a process already in place for opting out of specific resources or specific curriculum, and also a process for bringing allegations of alleged misconduct. In my opinion, these bills are legislation in search of a problem. Even though the stated reasons for the bills do not exist, the impact that these bills would have, if passed, is to create an atmosphere of fear and anxiety that will ultimately hurt staff and hurt children. In Ohio, we have a state board of education that is responsible for developing statewide academic standards for learning that establish the essential academic content and skills students are expected to learn at each grade level. Individual public school districts develop curriculum to make sure that students meet these academic standards. The curriculum is developed by teachers and other trained educators whose goal is to ensure that students can meet those statewide academic standards. And then ultimately, that curriculum is approved by the locally elected boards of education, not by state legislators. These bills usurp the ability of local school boards to determine curriculum, and in fact, would prevent curriculum being in conformance with some of the current statewide academic standards. For example, the American Government High School Standard includes the development of civic participation and skills, and requires that students learn that it includes the provision that democratic government is enhanced when individuals exercise the skills to effectively participate in civic affairs. This legislation would prohibit that. The language is vague and overbroad. I'm almost done, so bear with me.
All right. It's important.
There are not many definitions contained within the legislation, including there is not a definition of what a quote divisive concept is. However, the bills contain very serious penalties for failure to comply, including investigation or loss of licensure in House Bill 327 and withheld funding in House Bill 616. This creates an atmosphere of fear and anxiety for teachers and staff who do not know exactly what they may be punished for, but they do know that punishment would be severe. I think we can all agree that an atmosphere of fear and anxiety is not a healthy environment for teaching or learning. And finally, research shows definitively that the ability to learn is directly connected to those learning feeling a sense of belonging. One important component to developing a sense of belonging is being able to see oneself in what you are learning. For example, being able to read books about families like mine and about people like me. Seeing examples that include people who are relatable. This legislation would at worst prohibit and at best create anxiety and fear about selecting resources that represent a variety of lived experiences. In my opinion, this is not okay. It is unacceptable if there are some students who are not given the opportunity to learn because these bills would prevent their ability to develop a sense of belonging. So that is why I introduced the draft resolution. I know that you all have a copy of that draft resolution. I haven't made any changes to it thus far, but I guess I would open the resolution up for discussion among board members. And I've got it open in Google Docs, so if I need to make edits as we talk, I can do that.
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Daphne.
Okay. Yeah, as I read through each of these bills, I mean, again, I think your statement that they're concepts in search of a problem. And I feel that we, as a school district and across the state, across the country, have a lot of issues that should be addressed. And the fact that time and energy is being spent on these phantom issues is very frustrating to me. Our whole, I mean, in one of the bills, they are, it's just frightening to me. Section 2 or A is subject to the item D of this section. The Board of Education of each school district shall be the sole authority. And our state legislators have decided that they can supersede the local school board and create a carve out for D, which is just incredible to me, right? So the very nature of them taking away rights of a school board and a school district and a local community of electing and directing their education is very disheartening with regard to House Bill 616. And 322 and 327, there's the bill that talks about prohibiting discussion of current events. My husband's father was a social studies teacher at Gahanna, and I never met him. He unfortunately passed away when Boyd was a senior in high school. And later, years later, 20 years later, a guy was doing some concrete repair, and he said, "What did you say your last name is?" And I said, "Mooring." And he said, "Best teacher I ever had was Thomas Mooring. I had him for current events. It was the only class I looked forward to. The only class he did his homework for." And so that student, for him, it all came together, right? He had to use language arts and other skills, right, that he learned in other classes. But for him, his education came together when he was in current events. And so to think that this legislation could rob our students of that kind of rich interaction, be it whether he agreed or disagreed, he had the opportunity to argue his side, right? And he loved that. That hurts my heart. The other piece is they prohibit any kind of education in the legislative process, right? I participated in youth in government as a high school senior, and I thought that was an amazing program in learning about democracy and the whole democratic process, presenting the soft skills and the hard skills that we learned that in that process. We have Buckeye Boys State, Buckeye Girls State. There are so many things that the narrow-minded authors of these bills do not realize how they're going to hurt our students with what they've put in them. And I just feel that our district is known as being diverse. People move to Gahanna for the diversity. They're accepted. I will never forget the meetings we had, I think on the 3rd floor with regard to the high school and some of the people that had moved out of Columbus, and they were working hard to be able to have their children in our district and all the opportunities and acceptance that they had. And these bills seem to be stymieing it. And so that weighs heavily on me. And so I guess there's one area of the resolution that it's the 3rd paragraph from the bottom of page 1. Whereas educators and students can and should have appropriate conversations about difficult issues, should we insert age appropriate in front of appropriate? Age. No double appropriates, just should we have age appropriate, should have age appropriate conversations and or emotionally mature. I mean, there's just, if that kind of clarity would make people more comfortable, I could see adding that to the resolution. That's my only resolution related piece.
Anyone else, or I can go? All right. Let's see, I have so much to say, and I feel that for a year I've been looking at House Bill 322 and 327 and talking about it on my campaign and talking about it with people all over when the topic came up, and gotten a lot of feedback. Been, concerned about the vagueness and the intent. And it feels to me like LGBTQ people and people of color are specifically being targeted, especially by House Bill 616. To me, it feels, and I agree with that it's restricting education. And we're here to support our students' growth as individuals, and public schools are here, in my opinion, to prepare them to go out in the world. And from my conversations with people, they wholeheartedly agree with that as a goal that we can all share. I don't think that everyone is gonna be, there's different opinions. We have polar opposite views, beliefs, and we are all concerned about the safety of our kids and their well-being and their happiness. We share that. We all have that intent to support them in their growth. And one of my biggest lessons as a parent throughout this school is that I don't know everything. And I have to learn to give my daughter credit because she's growing up, and I want to support her to make her own choices and navigate the system and society. These bills, in my opinion, restrict free speech. They restrict open discussion. They restrict debate, everything the borough was talking about, and Daphne. They restrict thinking for themselves, learning about people who are different in any way. And it restricts dialogue about that. It restricts visibility. Telling the truth, it restricts telling the truth, the facts, what happened, what it was like, and what it's like now, and how can we learn, grow, and change. Restricting people who are different, I mean, from the people that created these bills. And let's just say, I feel like the vagueness reminds me of lying through omission. And I wholeheartedly believe in the truth. And we're not perfect, but we strive for that. And when people are intentionally vague or deceptive or evasive, and they don't bring forth their intent, their facts, their purpose, like to me, that's lying through omission. And yeah, they're targeting, there's an agenda there. I worry and have worried about court cases due to the vagueness, how it's going to be interpreted. People are, that is just going to be fear and anxiety is exactly the point. And that's the purpose of my opinion. I shouldn't say that, but I worry about that, the fear and intent, our staff, our administration, but most importantly, our students. And they're all in it. And what messages is that given to our youth? That we want to instill fear in their schools, alienation, that they are already struggling, that we know that they're struggling with depression, suicidality, self-destructive behaviors that we've never seen before at levels. And I believe that we do know, everyone in here knows what's being taught in kindergarten through 3rd grade. They're talking about their families. They're putting pictures of their families on the wall. And are we going to say to them, well, some pictures are going to go up, but not others. So you could be seen and not heard. That's where we're going. That's supportive. And well, we're also teaching in K through 3, weather, calendars, nature, creativity, health and happiness of our kids and our families. Sports, playtime, nap time, rest. That's what they're learning. They're being socialized together. They're with their fellow students and their teachers. If you count the hours, it's more than they're with me. And I was so grateful for that. I was so grateful, especially elementary, and I didn't like some of the messages she came home with. It doesn't suit everybody's every single need. But I did not blame the school, and I did not blame my daughter. We had good conversations that night at the dinner table or over the weekend or when we were out and about, and we engaged, and I helped her to think for herself. Okay, so public schools, access for all. That's why we love public schools. Everyone belongs. Everyone has a place here. One pride, one family. That says it all. And I believe that we live it here at Gehanna. And we're not perfect, and we strive to get there, though. Everyone has to be has the right to be proud of who they are and where they come from. That's what's so hard about that. And legislation like this has proven to hurt economies. And what kind of message is that going to send that we're feeding the distrust of our professionals? I trust the State Board of Education, and I trust the professionals here at the school. I trust the admin. We are all a team, and we're all trying to work together. And everyone has a right to their opinion. And as far as silencing others, they can choose not to listen. But I want to support kids' development and growth into going out into the real world. Like, so that's that. lastly, or getting there, I do think that these would have a damaging effect on our youth, our teachers, and our admin. And stoking the hierarchy and pushing people to the back of the bus is what it feels like to me, to be honest. And it's painful and it's scary and it's upsetting to our youth. And it's upsetting to other parents as well. Gahanna voters elected this board, and I feel that we are proud of who we are as a community, and we can struggle and we can have open dialogue on hard topics. And I really respect and like that. I want that. And so that's one good thing out of this bill, especially the recent 616, is that we are having this dialogue. So thank you. That's it. Thank you, Pearl.
Pearl, I thought that your resolution was very well written, very eloquent.
Yeah.
And
Unity.
sorry. I thought your resolution was very well written, very eloquent. I too have read all three of the bills. I've listened to a lot, researched a lot, talked to a lot of people, got a lot of emails. I don't disagree with anything that you've said, Daphne, that you've said, and Dion that you have said. So I don't want to repeat anything, but I will build upon it. Policy making in the United States is a very complicated, intricate process. And it starts with the agenda setting, which is identifying the problem. And as we've all stated, a problem has not been identified. It's been stated, but there's been no examples to identify it. So you can't jump a step and get to solution without having a problem. So that was my first thing. The vagueness bothered me. It's very, very vague. There are no definitions. It's totally open to interpretation. And to build on what Dion said, it does feel like a trap. We could lose school funding. We know that they've been decreasing funding. So is this another tactic to decrease it further? It feels that way because of how vague it is written. And for teachers to have that fear of losing their licenses, I mean, we don't have people going into education as it is. To have to feel like you have to look over your shoulder all the time and be criticized for every word you say, that does not feel like an environment that you want to be part of. And again, there's been no examples. There are ways to opt out of our curriculum. If there weren't like I understand that there are things that are not for everyone. I respect that. And that's why I respect that we have a policy that lets people opt out. But then opt out, like don't stop someone else from getting something that is important to them. When my daughter was in preschool, she asked her teacher why one of the girls in the class had two moms. Because she didn't know anyone that had two moms. And they had a discussion and a note went home about the discussion. And Lily came home really happy that her friend had two moms. And it bothers me that conversation, it wouldn't happen if this gets passed. And so that makes it seem like something's wrong. When you can't have a conversation about something that isn't wrong, but it's being told you can't have the conversation on, then how does that make that little girl feel? How does it make the parents feel? We're supposed to be inclusive. We love everyone. And I believe everyone in this room loves everyone. So why wouldn't we accept and have conversation to like, if you can't have the conversation, then you're saying it's wrong. And I adamantly feel it is not wrong. I get emotional. People have reached out and have felt that as a board, we should be neutral on this, and we shouldn't let politics into our school buildings. Our state policymakers have let politics into the school buildings by bringing these bills forward. And that is why we have to be involved. They impact the school. And I said when I campaigned that every decision I made would be with the children at the heart of it. And this is not inclusive to our children. It's also not inclusive to our teachers who teach our children. So that's why I do support this resolution.
there's not a lot more to add to that. All the different conversations. I would say that I come from a long family history of public service. My dad and my uncle were both in the state legislature. My cousin is in the state legislature now. I'm appalled at the way things are being handled now at the state level, that open dialogue and discourse is being kind of attacked, and it's so polarizing. The fact that these two bills, the first two bills, went to state and local government instead of education is appalling to me. So, I mean, I firmly respect that everyone has different opinions and different beliefs, and I'm not one to judge on what your beliefs are, but we're talking about public education and making sure that every student has the opportunity to learn and to have dialogue. And as a parent, I feel very strongly that I wanted my kids to be exposed to different views. That was a huge learning opportunity, that, to Dion's point, that we could have conversations about at the dinner table or whatever. I mean, sometimes you learn the most from when you're not in agreement with somebody else. And I think to not have this resolution and not support our teachers and support our students, and, you know, the whole conversation about kindergarten through third grade, like Kara said, it's simple. I mean, you're not having in-depth, detailed conversations about things. You're just saying it's okay to have, you know, this is what their family looks like. You know, you could have people who have families that have adopted kids from all over the world. Is that wrong and different? No, it's just that's their situation. And I feel as a school district, we have to be supportive of all of those situations and give simple explanations and go on, because that's really all that it entails. So I think to everyone's point, I'm strongly in support of the resolutions, and the fact that nothing else has gone forward on these other two clearly states to me that there's no substance there, because when there is substance, there's movement, and there's been no movement. And, you know, I abhor lying by omission and not being able to give the facts. And we had very good dialogue on the campaign trail about, well, what does that really mean? And give me examples. And when you can't give examples, there's no there. And we need to move on. And I think we're at the time of healing, and we need to be at a time of healing, and we need to move on, because we need to get our kids back up to speed and take care of them and get them to move on. So I'm in full support.
So I noted the one suggested change to add the word age before the word appropriate. I don't know how anyone feels. I mean,
I think naming some of the specific targeted groups, if there's a way to put that in there.
so another paragraph, is that what you?
Maybe, yeah. What?
I hear what you're saying, but I think I think there's sometimes it's, you want them to focus on the big picture and not a microcosm of that picture. And so is this language, whereas the language contained would jeopardize the ability of Gahanna Jefferson School District to ensure all students feel a sense of belonging and build an egalitarian culture that embraces differences and promotes a safe environment in which all students and educators can be the authentic selves. Does that just not
I mean, that
comprehensive
sounds
enough?
beautiful.
And just to be clear, that language is mirrored, that is not new language that I wrote. That is language that came from the resolution that the board passed, reaffirming the district's core values.
Oh, okay.
And that language also came from the district's equity and access for all plan. So I just want to be clear that that was an intentional mirroring of that language in those places.
Smart. So you think differently?
Well,
You think that it should,
I mean,
Yeah.
that's positive and everything, although like, it's talking about anyone who's different, in my mind, it's talking about anyone who's different in any way. But the hot topics that we're hearing about is BLM, LGBTQ, and those groups, anyone who's different, you know, in any way. And so special needs, like who's excluded, you know, it's so vague, you don't know. But in particular, I think the most vulnerable or the most targeted by society. Every time you open the news, there's stories, and it's relentless. And to have that come into the school and be hung over our instructors' heads, and the admin has to implement. And so that's over their heads too, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know how to do it, and maybe we can hear comments because we know that.
so it sounds like your audience is the people in our district. And this
Anyone
audience is the
marginalized or
legislators.
underserved groups that are being addressed by this bill or
So-
affected.
I think what you're at, and you correct me if I'm not understanding correctly, but I think what you're asking is perhaps to insert a whereas clause after that paragraph
Yeah,
that Daphne just read.
yeah.
That would say, whereas the language contained in these bills, and then specifically targets underrepresented.
Yeah, marginalized or underrepresented. Oops.
Okay, I not good at writing and talking at the
I
same
don't-
time.
Well,
So what I could do is try to write while we continue to have this
Okay,
conversation.
okay.
The only other thing I caught, well, maybe I should wait till you're done writing.
No, go ahead. It's because I'm probably not going to be able to get the sentence
I know.
drafted in a way that sits
Right,
well in my
yeah.
head.
I haven't
while
even
we're sitting
tried
here
right
tonight.
now.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe just take notes and
Yeah.
then tweak it later. The fourth, whereas, local control, and I don't know if we need to change it or not, but I wanted to bring up, like, I don't personally feel that any of us want to have control, meaning power of control. So I don't know if there are different words there. All three bills represent an unprecedented regulation of curriculum and instruction and intrusion into local control. I just don't want anyone to interpret that we're looking to have some kind of power, and that's why we're
Well, I
doing
think
this.
that really references the bill
Yeah.
section that I spoke to,
Okay.
right? The except D piece on 616, section 2, paragraph 2. And quite frankly, was it Dion's point, I don't remember who, maybe it was Sue that made it, you know, if this would have come through the Ohio Department of Education and the State Board of Education, or went to them for consultation, it would show an authentic desire to have it be a non-political event, right? But
right.
it did not.
Right.
So it, by its presentation and the methodology that it's being pushed, is a political motive.
Good point, Daphne.
I think, Kara, I understand what you're saying, and I think where I'm struggling is that local control is the phrase.
No,
used.
I think we
yeah.
need to keep it, my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, when she explained it, that makes sense.
Okay,
Because it does, it connects right to what they're saying, right? Or not saying.
right. Any other comments or suggestions for adjusting the language in the resolution?
Let me just read a little snippet of something that was sent to me.
Okay.
So talking about the different communities. Such silencing and proactively anti-student, anti-education, anti-educator policy would formalize and normalize discrimination against and exclusion of students, caregivers, and teachers, increasing isolation and abuse and possibly violence towards them, in turn possibly increasing risk of PTSD and other mental health issues, including, in short, such anti-American policies would amount to heighten potential, it just kind of goes on
Mental
to
health
down the,
stress.
down the, possibly triggering more of a public health crisis. And, litigation against the school districts as well, like Kara was talking about. But the damage is primarily to the students.
Right.
And then all the other, the litigation and all that comes later, but the students are being impacted today.
Just by the
And-
introduction of these bills?
Yeah, it is. The students are upset. They're scared, they're hurt. They don't feel respected. And it's hurtful. And we've seen generations go through this. This is nothing new. And,
It feels like we're
fear is
taking
a
steps
powerful
backwards.
motivator. Yeah, well, I'm sorry, what?
No, I was gonna say, it feels like we're taking steps backwards when we're introducing bills like this.
I can, just to address the hurt that Dion talked about.
Thank you.
On Friday, about 90 students.
Change to another microphone. That's really for somebody.
Sorry.
Oh, somebody else has it on. Okay.
This works.
Yes. About 90 students on Friday participated in a day of silence, most of whom were LGBTQ students and some other students in support of them. And I got some calls, respectful calls, emails from people saying that this protest was not something that the district should support or allow. And I thought about it, and I don't know how you stop somebody from being silent. Number one. Two, these students feel an existential threat to who they are. Their very being is being questioned. That's the chilling effect that Dion talked about. And about 5 or 6 of them, we didn't have time because the school day was ending, spoke in the library. And most of us had tears in our eyes listening to them. 40 or 50 of them went down on April 9th to the State House to protest 616. I participated that day in the Moms of Liberty dialogue at New Life Church. And Paul Rossi, one of the speakers from New York, stood up and said, the way you push back on DEI, SEL, and any number of things, is to announce your identity, to not be dissuaded from who you are, to say who you are with pride and not back off that. Pardon me, I'm talking. Yeah, I think that was rude. At the end of the day, that's what these students are doing. They're announcing who they are, their identity, and I'm proud of them for doing that. And I don't know who thinks they have a right to existentially threaten them. That's not the country I learned about in school.
We're better than that. We're all better than that. Thank you.
So just like in our regular board meetings, I would ask that we keep applause and reactions, if we could, keep them out of the discussion. This is a committee meeting dialogue. I appreciate, I guess, knowing how people feel, but it distracts from our ability to have the dialogue we need to have. So is there any, I'm sorry,
Thanks,
go ahead.
Pearl. No, do you have anything else? you
I'm
wanna-
still trying to work on this additional
Okay.
sentence.
Okay.
I don't
Should
know,
we open it up?
yeah,
Should we
so,
open it up?
yeah, you can.
All right, we can open it up.
I just wanted to say that I hope you weren't insinuating that Moms for Liberty says that we threaten these kids or anything.
Or that they don't have.
I
speeches like
mentioned
everyone
a
else.
speaker you had,
Yeah.
right? I thought it was a good dialogue. Sue and I were there. I'm referencing what Paul Rossi said. And I want to just say this. I agree with him. We should all tell who we are, not be dissuaded from who we are.
Right.
But it's not one directional. What I'm saying is everybody gets to do what Paul said, not just him, right? Because this is America. So when that slide you put up on, not being dissuaded, being proud of who you are, not being dissuaded from your beliefs. Amen.
Right.
The point I'm making is 50 kids from Gahanna Lincoln High School were at the State House doing the same thing, protesting 616. So I think there's an irony here. And I'm not insinuating I had a good day. Everything I said to you guys about that day, I think, what did I say at the end? Somehow, some way, we all need to come together for our kids.
I couldn't agree more.
The suicide rate in our country for 11 to 24-year-olds has never been higher. And they see the divisiveness in our society, and they see what it's doing, and it hurts them. And I think we're all better than that.
It's happening from all angles.
I mean, I know I'm not the one that brought it up, but the way in which you're referring to it, it sounds like you're saying that that's how he felt, that he didn't support those students. And I was there that day.
Oh, I don't know.
And I don't remember him ever saying that they didn't have the right to do it.
Okay.
He just said, you have the right.
Yeah.
So when I come to these board meetings,
So we agree.
I have the right, just like you do.
This is what we're doing right now.
Right, but what I'm saying.
Doesn't
is the
exist
way-
enough in our democracy.
Right.
This right here, deliberative dialogue, is what makes democracy work. So I went to that because I assumed there would be different views from my own. And I need to put my biases aside and listen to those views. I spent 5 hours at that meeting on a Saturday because I was interested in views maybe unlike my own.
Right, and I appreciate that, but what I'm saying is what I have heard you say tonight and what I heard you say last Thursday, I don't feel as though you're giving a fair representation of what he said. Because it sounds, what you're saying is that he doesn't believe that those students have the right to do it.
No, I didn't say that. So that's an
On
unfair
Thursday,
implication.
you
Okay,
did.
so
I had- I
let me
had
stop.
Thursday
Let me
board
let me
meeting,
stop
and that's
here.
what you said.
So you have your perspective and you have yours, and it's heated,
Correct, yeah.
and
I'm not,
We're-
I mean,
I'm
it's
just saying,
emotional or.
It's recorded from
It's
Thursday's
intense.
board meeting.
Yeah.
You saying,
All right.
that you didn't feel as though he was saying those students have the right.
I don't know. All I
I
know
can
is,
send it to
all,
you.
my only point I'm making is we all have a right
I
to be
agree.
recognized for who we are.
I totally
Let's
agree.
leave it at
All
that.
right. So I'm gonna move it to this side of the room, and then I'll get to you, and then I'll get to you, please.
I was.
All right.
My hand up before anybody else.
I'm just trying for some balance here. All right, go ahead.
Thank you for letting me talk. I really enjoy the fact that you guys talk about passion, and I think that's a motivation. When we talk about facts, logic, that's different than passion. I just want to note that. But I also want to say it's a little concerning that everyone on this board seems to just support everyone else. I don't see a movement, and I think you mentioned a rich dialogue, and I'm not seeing that. And I just want to note my concern to support that you have done a wonderful job, the two of you, to let everyone kind of comment on all the policies. The only person that you shut down, and I quote, "This is not an inclusive conversation." And to use those terms to not let that person speak tells me that you're almost limiting the information that you'll accept. So
You're
I
saying
just
that
ask
I
that it's a
said that?
safe conversation.
Are you saying that I said this is not an inclusive?
No, I
No,
think
this
it
lady
was-
right here
yeah,
said,
it was-
this is not an
It-
inclusive conversation, and therefore she could no longer talk.
I did say it, and I said it when you mentioned the word sin, because sin is connected to religion.
No, it's not.
If you look it up in the dictionary,
It's
it's
not.
connected to, well, to some people it is.
Well,
And so that's,
the
that,
fact is, it's not.
well, but again, and I was supporting Burl saying this wasn't the time to have that conversation. So I wasn't shutting down her idea. And
Okay.
now that we're on this topic, like on what she was concerned with, she is more than we're more than happy to hear her speak. But at that time, I was supporting that wasn't the time.
And I appreciate that. I just want to make sure everyone aware that we all have our own biases and that we truly remain open, because there was no rich dialogue here. Very passionate dialogue, and I could tell there was a lot of research in it. And I'm impressed by that. But thank you very much.
I don't want you to think that we always agree, because I can tell
We
you,
don't.
we don't.
Okay.
We
That's
don't.
usually what I
So
do.
there's
Everybody
lots
in a
of other
professional meeting.
conversations out there where you
We'll
can
go with
see,
that.
on that part of it. I think the part to be clear that we all do agree on is we're very concerned for our kids and the students, and them feeling safe and feeling like they can come to school and learn, and that our teachers aren't. We already have concerns for our teachers. We don't want to make it so restrictive that more teachers leave the profession. And I think there needs to become an understanding of that, the hate and the discourse that we all start sharing against one another is so divisive. And we need to come together more. We have way more in common than we have differences.
Our differences are
And that's what we have to keep our eye on, the prize of what is it that we are hoping to achieve. We want our students to receive a great education, and we want them to understand that there are different people and different backgrounds and what makes this country great. And it's not indoctrinating them, it's getting them to think on their own and give them all sides of the spectrum of the world in which we live, and to accept people for that.
And I love that. And I don't think anyone wants anyone hurt. I think everyone's against bullying. Other resources, maybe outside the school, because the majority of the students, I think, that go to your school don't have other options. I mean, if you talk about private school, stuff like that, that's not available to everyone. So I just want to make sure that we respect everyone's view.
Right,
And
absolutely,
we do care about their education.
right.
And if there's maybe alternative
That's the focus.
resources out there, because your suicide rate conversation, bullying rate, yes, it is skyrocketed.
Right.
So I won't take any more of your time. Thank you
No,
very
you're
much.
welcome to the floor. We're glad you're here and we want your voice.
I wish I was a little more prepared for this.
No, you know
One last
what?
question.
You're fine.
Were the policies, were they available for this meeting to review that you had on the screen here?
The policies are on our website. If you go to Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools Board of Education, and there's a policy link. They're all listed numerically. And so you can access them anytime.
Was it draft edit? How quickly were the draft edits available?
They're not usually available before the
The
meeting.
recommended changes
Oh, the
are
changes.
not currently
Right.
updated on the website.
Right, but
Let's be
Yeah,
let's be
but-
clear.
Why don't we change
The
state
policies themselves are all listed on the
The
website.
current,
But the
But
draft,
the current
the
policies.
current policy are, go ahead.
yeah, but this won't, the policies that we talked about tonight will not be on, it'll be on our next agenda, right?
May
Some of them will be
19th.
on May, but the ones that we're gonna send to our attorney will be reviewed and they will be, fully baked before.
oh,
we
yeah,
bring
yeah,
it.
I get that. I just want to know how I could be less ignorant coming in this meeting.
Yeah.
We won't.
He's asking about the we have not been the district has not been updating the link.
No,
There was a link that was on the district's website on the policy page that used to link you to the folder to see the recommended changes ahead of policy. That link hasn't, I don't know when it was last updated. So I would not recommend clicking on that link. I know that question has come up multiple times because the link is still there. The district needs to do something on the district's end to make that more accessible, but the district hasn't figured that out yet.
Thank you very much for respecting what I said.
Well, while we're on this, what's?
All right,
So the
actually,
chair-
I'm gonna
yeah, the
move
chair's
it.
Gotta
She's-
control the conversation.
Okay,
Go ahead.
okay. I wanted to thank Phoebe for the compliment she gave the sponsors of Bill 616, and it was a compliment. You said they would make it narrow.
Did you say? I didn't.
Isn't your name Phoebe?
No,
Who?
Daphne.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm sorry, Daphne. I want to thank you for giving the sponsors of 616 a
I
compliment.
can't
It
hear
was-
you.
You said the sponsors of legislation 616, you called them narrow-minded, or the bill being narrow-minded, and I take that as a compliment because truth is narrow-minded. And when Manley mentioned the LBGs were being targeted, which is a lie, if anything, the legislation was drafted to protect innocent children from being induced into a lifestyle of immorality. So when he did say that LBGs were being targeted, which again is a lie, it reminded me that while you said truth, they were narrow-minded, and truth is narrow-minded, that the LBG statement reminded me that broad is the road that leads to destruction.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is really about the legislation.
Yes.
Okay, so all this other stuff, I guess, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as the legislation. And it is not the place of our legislature to be creating this kind of legislation. And that's the bottom line, and that's what should be in this resolution. And if you took out some of these, I would say more touchy-feely kind of whereases, maybe it would be more open to acceptance, maybe. But really, it's about the legislation and the place. It's not their place. The Board of Education has a place for that, and our elected officials, and that's all. I mean, we don't have to make this difficult.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone? And then
Hi, I'm new
who
at
raised
this.
their hand first? I have my back to you, so, okay. Thank you. Thank you. for the help.
I'm on the fence about sending my child to school in the fall because of what's going on in the Hero School District. So I want to know, and I don't know, maybe this isn't the place for it to get answered, but this is what I'm hearing. Parent of an upcoming child in the Hero School District. I've been in Indiana for about 10 years. That was new to me. I don't have a high schooler. There's protest at the high school. So can anyone have a silent protest and then talk at the end? Can anyone leave?
So
those?
we do actually have a policy related to student protest. It is on the district's website. If you go to the board section, the bylaws and policies,
Okay.
you can take a look and see that policy, but that isn't actually part of tonight's conversation.
Okay, so that's good. I just want to know what protests we're allowed to have, what ones we're not allowed to have, if it's teacher-led, parent-led. I remember you saying something earlier about maybe, or someone said maybe we should put age appropriate in front of something. Who determines age appropriate? Would it be
That
the
was my
parent
concern
of
with
a
adding that
child,
word.
or would it be someone's teacher? Who determines the age appropriateness? So that's a question I have about
Just
certain
leave it up.
subjects
That's a good
or
one.
topics. Yeah, because I think I would determine, right, who would say something to my child, because I'm the parent. Okay. And then,
Can I make a comment about that?
please,
I remember hearing the president of the Board of Education
Mhm.
talking about how they develop the curriculum, and that as professionals, they develop the curriculum at an age appropriate level. And that they think about that in the way that they introduce topics and subjects and how they expand on the subject as they go further along in the age.
is
the
that
grades.
education?
So I'm
Right.
just talking about, yeah.
Right. Yeah, so
the
that's
age
probably
appropriate.
education, not
So-
like social economics
Yeah.
or social
But it is a
stuff.
part of
Social-
schooling.
politics and,
No,
A family.
the curriculum being
Family.
developed in
Family.
age-appropriate ways by the professionals, the Board of Education, the state. So, yeah, but we're fine, we're fine to take it out.
That's a really fine
We're
line,
fine
when
to
we're
take
talking
it
about
out.
children and sexuality. So I'm really like, I want to be on that. And then, are our schools allowed, in the classroom, allowed to have like political views posted on posters?
Again, there is a different policy that is contained in, if you go to the bylaws and policies, you can look at that
And see
policy.
what posters.
That's, yeah,
allowed
that's
to be
not
noted.
part of tonight's discussion.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm a newbie, so I appreciate the education. Thank you.
And, right behind me.
So, I just want to give a little background before I give my opinion. I'm 60, I'm straight, I've been married, I'm Christian. I've been married to a Christian man for almost 40 years. I was raised in a conservative Christian home, and I was taught that LGBTQ people were sinning and would not be in heaven. God took me through a path about 4+ years ago to show me this is not true. I don't feel like any less of a Christian today because of the path that I feel God led me on. I teach at Middle School West, and many of our students and our families are families of LGBTQ, whether it be the child or the adults in their home. So that's the background that leads me to saying my opinion. I'm really proud to teach for a school board that will write a referendum with such strong language that values students and families of all types of families. I know this board to not always agree. And so the rich language, it happens. It's rich. As being a teacher in this district and a community member. But I'm proud to have a board that agrees unanimously on this referendum. I think that speaks to who we elected to the board and the people that voted for the election. Because I think that that's part of a democratic society, is putting people on the board that have your beliefs and values. So when people are choosing to run for a board, that's where you get those people to run for a board that believe like you do, and then you surround them with the votes and get them on the board. And I feel like our board is representative of the voters of Gahanna, and that's why you were elected. And I'm proud to teach for a district with this board being unanimous. For the state to take away the rights of the local board is wrong. So no matter which side you land on this topic, the legislation is taking it out of our board's hands, and that's where I would want to leave it. This is the community I live in. I don't live in other communities around the state. And I want this decision to stay within my local board. My wish and my dream is that all types of students, regardless of race, religion, gender identity, family makeup, could see themselves in the adults around them in their schools. And they don't. We don't have teachers that students can see themselves when it comes to religion, gender identity. That's my dream someday, that our kids will see themselves in the adults in their school. Finally, to restrict our curriculum and conversations to not include these topics shows value only to the homes that believe this is wrong. Actually, it was quoted by somebody here as being a sin. We need to represent all homes and families. We're a public school, not private. Families that want their agenda only taught in their child's school should consider allowing their children to attend a private school. And I know that that's not accessible to everyone. So I guess it depends on, I mean, if you're going to go to a public school has to represent everybody. So you can't put in curriculum or conversations that exclude. You can have your children taught a different way at home. You can have conversations around the dinner table. You can coach them up, front load them to conversations they may hear at school.
To exclude them from.
You can opt to exclude them. But to push of legislation in a public school that excludes, that's not what a public school is about. A public school should represent everybody. That's it.
Response to that directly, just really quick, well, respectful
Yes.
about it.
No, no.
I really appreciate, that was heartfelt and sharing your story. I appreciate that. I just want to make one point. I think you said it one way and then maybe contradicted it. Yes, the community elects you, and I respect that altogether. But like our president, and for all those people that didn't vote for the president, he's responsible for respecting the entire nation. And I think I want to make sure you guys just keep that in mind. And you said this, that respect all the students.
Right.
That's what they're doing by this referendum.
Okay, and I'm not going to comment on that, but you said that, we elected you, your viewpoints, and that's who you should, I just
Well,
want to make sure it's.
Correct, and
Just a
that's, I
clarification.
feel like we have elected a board that no matter what their personal beliefs are there for every type of student and every type of family. To the extent that you're willing to put strong language in a referendum and deliver it to our state legislators.
Thank you.
So 2 parts. Joan Miller, GJA president, speaking first. We would just like to say that we 100% support and applaud the board's very clear indication of where they stand on this legislation. If we had enough time, I would say that we will, endorse it. I just haven't had enough time. I have 578 members, so talking to all of them, that's take me a little while. But we are a Democratic Party, an institution. We are a professional institution, though, more than anything. And our profession is being attacked in this legislation. So we applaud any steps that the board will take that will send a message to the legislature that vague, not just the language of the bill, but the vague nature of where do those complaints go and what does that look like and how do we decide if I'm following what's board adopted, but a parent has a problem, where do we sit with that board adoption versus what the state is now saying is and is not appropriate. So I will just say that from the GJA executive board, which is myself and my 3 other officers and a vast majority of my building reps that I've already talked to, we 100% support and applaud this resolution. Joan Miller, Indiana Jefferson parent. I agree with Ms. Is it Hoffman? Hoffman, yes. That I do think that the primary focus of this is that it is an incredible overreach. And I agree with what both of you are saying, like we elect school boards, yes, they have to represent everyone, but we elect them to lead for us, right? They're supposed to be the experts. We listen to what they have to say, they talk to their experts, and then they make those decisions. So I applaud that. I would just say too that, a lot of times the teachers get dismissed. I'm sitting here surrounded by teachers, but we're all taxpayers in this community too. A vast majority of us are also parents. I chose to build my house here. I chose to move here for the diversity. As Tracy said, if I were going to rattle off, raised Catholic, heterosexual, upper, I would probably be considered upper class now, right? But I grew up solid mid-class, small town with no diversity. And this was vitally important for us to move here. My daughter goes to the high school. She's been here since 1st grade. We've had the luck of Blacklick and East and all of that. And I have never once felt that she was being indoctrinated or guilted or made to feel any other way than let me present the educational standards that are expected. And we want you to do the best job that you can as a teenager, as a child, to think and write and read and ask questions. So I can't say enough about this resolution because I think it is incredibly dangerous if we start limiting what we're putting in front of children.
I don't.
You got it all around the room.
Over here, I want to hear from people who haven't spoken yet, and we'll get to everyone.
Got a student.
Yeah, thank you.
So I just wanted to say, I'm 16 and currently a junior at GLHS, and I'm also a queer non-binary student. And I cannot tell you the amount of fear I had the night that my father told me that this bill was proposed, and to see the aggressive pushback that you have and your board has made and the resolutions you've made, it warms my heart. It truly does. It makes me feel safe and proud to be a part of this community. So I just wanted to applaud you guys for that. It's very brave. So thank you.
We're with you.
Craig Clausen, thank you, board, thank you, superintendent, for your development. One of the things that we're seeing, and by the way, forgive me for the mask, I have a bit of a cold and I just don't want to share it with all of you.
Thank you.
One of the things that we're seeing in other states that have performed these type of legislation moves is malicious compliance, right? Where the spirit, where the bill is being enforced beyond the spirit of the bill. What this will mean for us is that no divisive topics for a school district will be discussed. Things that members of our community may feel that are not divisive will become divisive. Things like comparative religions will become a non-discussionable topic in our schools due to the fact that any religion could be considered divisive. So I feel that this school district, and to mirror what my child had said, this school district is doing the right thing by standing up, not just for the students, for the faculty, but also for the criteria and the curriculum that will help to make sure that our students are well prepared for a global economy now and in the future. So that's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Have their hand up before me.
Yeah.
So I want to comment about, you said that this is something that should be referenced to the State Board of Education. This is a legal issue, and should be about curriculum. I think that, to me, the people writing the bill are probably more concerned about protecting kids from a legal standpoint, and making sure that kids aren't exposed to sexual content before 3rd grade, and also the civil rights of, I guess, white people or people who are not a minority. So I think there's more to it than curriculum. I think there are bigger issues I think they're trying to address with it, and that's probably why they're doing it through, they're not taking it through the State Board of Education, because it's not just a curriculum thing. And a lot of it with teaching sexuality, gender identity, and those kind of things through K through 3rd grade, to me actually seems pretty extreme to be teaching those concepts in K through 3.
Because
And
it's
that's
not.
if that's not happening in
It's
Gahanna,
not.
excuse me, I'm trying to talk. If that's not happening in Gahanna, then there should be no problem with this. If you're not teaching racist or divisive concepts, then there should be no, if these are fandom issues, what's the big pushback? Why the big resolution? To me, and then you're saying that, well, they're making it political. I feel like our board made it political when the 2020 resolution was passed that said we began doing social justice work and using our children to create social justice. And that's what we're actively doing in our school district. So to me, that's political language. And I think that's what they're trying to prevent here. So my suggestion would be to rescind the 2020 resolution, problem solved. You don't have to worry about it because we're not being political. We're not pushing racist and divisive content, and we shouldn't be doing sexual content anyway. So for the board to pass a resolution, you're probably alienating half of your voter base because Gahanna is a divided town. We have a Republican mayor. We have Republicans and we have conservatives in this town. And I know academia has become very, left politically. It is what it is, but, that doesn't mean that everybody just has to fall in line and, we're all gonna go to the left, and if you don't like it, you can leave. I don't feel like that's a responsible way to handle things. Voters, see these things going on, and they see K-3 sexual content, they see divisive concepts, and they're concerned. So I feel like these are valid concerns people have, and I feel like the district has made it political first. That's my opinion.
So I'm not sure what you're insinuating would be left about making sure that all students feel a sense of belonging and see themselves represented in the curriculum.
So when it comes to family values, and for me, transgender children, adults, do whatever you want. You're perfectly free, make whatever decisions. When it comes to children, when you talk about a hormone blocker, or puberty blockers, and hormone therapies, and
do you have some
surgery.
example of that going on?
I'm
in
saying
our
that
schools?
teaching these concepts.
Because I've yet to see the examples of those.
Well, that's what
things
if
going on.
it's not a problem, then why are you pushing back?
There has yet to be one example of one of those things that you're talking
There are
about.
books in the libraries, in Gahanna schools.
And again, having materials available so that students can see themselves and their families represented in the materials that are available in our building is what we are trying to make sure is not prohibited.
Okay, so
Your
why are
children
there-
can
why are
read
there-
any
why is there a
books.
limit of- I haven't seen any books, biographies about President Trump in the school libraries.
If that is a book, so I don't know if that's true or not, but I would.
So when you're questioning me saying academia.
No, I'm
was
not,
left.
I'm not. You
I'm saying-
said academia was left, and
No,
I
so
was
you were
asking what you
questioning-
meant.
You were saying you were questioning me saying that. And I think people who lean right maybe notice it more than people who lean left. And I'm saying that I think the district should be aware of the political makeup of our community. We are a very diverse, politically, racially, in every way.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
That's something that, it sounds good to say, we want to include everybody, but are you actually doing it? Because there's a variety of.
So if you're suggesting that there are some materials that are being excluded from our libraries right now, I honestly would be curious and open to hear what is being excluded.
Okay, absolutely. I mean,
I would appreciate the follow-up. if
I
you've got it.
will definitely send you, I have lots of things I could suggest for the library.
That's great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do a book drive.
All right, you haven't spoken. Go ahead.
Appreciate everybody being open to all the viewpoints that we've had here today. I agree that this should be about the bill, making this conversation. Beryl had said earlier, I believe it was Beryl.
Girl, like girl.
Beryl, I'm sorry.
That's
If it was
okay.
wrong, if I misquoted you, if it was somebody else. Mentioned that it's unconstitutional for the legislature to overreach in such a way.
I can't hear him.
Sorry. However, the board went along with multiple constitutional legislative overreaches during the COVID issue. So if that's going to be an argument, we should be consistent, staying consistent with what's constitutional and what's not. Okay? I haven't decided if I'm for or against any of the bills. However, some of the things brought up here tonight, like if we're having teachers leave in record numbers, if no one wants to get into education anymore, fights, harassment, and bullying are at an all-time high, then maybe doubling and tripling down on policies that got us to this point might not be the best way to handle the issue. So it seems like the last few years have been very more progressive. I think blocking a bill that's going to make us think a different way isn't the best idea. And I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. Just my thoughts on the matter.
Just to clarify, I'm not arguing with you. What I said was unconstitutional was the overbroad language. So I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to.
Well, there's a lot of overbroad language.
I just wanted to be clear that that's what I was suggesting was unconstitutional. Was
I
the,
agree.
Thank you for speaking. Waiting.
She's a teacher. Yes. Is this on? Okay, just quick background. My name is Carrie Gregory. I've taught for 35 years. I am over at Middle School West. My husband and I also community members. We raised all three of our boys in this district. Couple of things, and I made notes, of course, my phone keeps. I will say this, just a quick response that I didn't have prepared. In as far as the previous comment about, well, if kids are so messed up, maybe it's time to, if there are so many mental issues of mental illness and students are all-time high of incidents of depression, suicidal ideation, whatever, and I'm the one saying this, I'm not saying you did, that perhaps we were so messed up in how we've gotten here that it is time to look at something like this kind of a House bill. I just want to say, in response to that, as the mom of a gay child, I have to say, gay kids, LGBTQ kids who have support have much better mental health. So if there are things wrong with kids, we can't blame getting too supportive of them. Okay, so I just gotta get that out there because that hit me in the heart. So let me just say a couple of things. Going back to Ms. Coates, your example of like your daughter and the two moms, I'm just kind of picturing this futuristic House bill world in which I'm teaching. And I'm teaching, maybe I'm teaching kids, and they say, why does so-and-so have two moms? And as the teacher, am I now not allowed to say families might look different? Or, that's what their family looks like. Or some kids have two moms or two dads. Those are just statements. Those are statements of fact. They're not even saying, I believe that should be a good thing, or I'm in support of that. I mean, all of you know I am because I have a gay son and I just admitted that. But those are not statements of support. But I could be, as a teacher, a parent could take, could object to the fact that I said that. What do? Stare at the child and say nothing. I also, the fact that a discussion was had, but a letter went home to parents. So you were informed as a parent, hey, this came up, this is what was said. So as a parent, you now have the right to take that where you need to. I will tell you as a teacher, in these post-bill worlds, there's going to be all kinds of secrecy and fear. There's no letter going home that child said that and that this is how I responded. I mean, the whole climate of the fear and the lack of specificity on what it is we are or are not allowed to say or do. The incredible, you could literally, absolutely ruin a teacher's life and livelihood if you don't like what came out of their mouth in one situation. And teachers are human too. We work real hard to keep opinion, subjective kinds of things out of lessons. But I went through 4 years of an undergrad degree and I have 2 master's degrees. And at some point you gotta trust me, or what's the point of schooling? And if you can't trust your public school teacher and you have to regulate and oversee and make sure this isn't happening, make sure that's not what's being said, then it's no longer public education, publicly funded by everybody's taxpayer dollars. And we have to educate every child that comes through our building. We have to make sure every child who comes through our doors feels a sense of belonging, feels a sense of value. You can't learn if you fear. You can't learn if you are worried and anxious. We have to create a sense of acceptance and belonging so we can teach. And things like this just are absolute fuel for an environment of accusations. It witch hunts. It's gonna be a witch hunt. And we can tap dance all we want around it. But we know this House bill is not being proposed. These House bills are not being proposed to keep children, they're proposed to keep children, quote unquote, safe from one particular ideology. And I am a parent who loves my child. My parental rights should be just as valuable as anybody else. If I want my child to be able to go into a school library and get an age-appropriate, absolutely well-reviewed book that might, where somebody, the book, there might be a gay dad in the book or something, or, you know, somebody's, a main character's got, you know, 2 aunts or something. If my child reading that book feels better about himself, I'm all for it. Your child doesn't have to read that book. But for you to tell me how to parent my child is where I don't understand how that should be possible in a public school. I have a whole lot more fun with stop because I'm getting a little emotional.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, wait.
that's one that's about
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. All right. And then,
I don't know how you just, I'm usually pretty loud. Just a point of reference to what you had brought up earlier, and I thought it was very appropriate with the word control. I would agree, I would take that out. The word control, I mean, just to me can carry a negative connotation. I was thinking a better word would be that this threatens your autonomy. That you are an autonomous body, and we elected you people to do the job. And I don't think anything should step on that autonomy. That we want control kept at the local level. I'm also very pleased to know that the parent's right to decide whether or not their child participates in any of these coursework is respected. I think what I hear a lot of is a lot of fear, and unfortunately it comes out, I think, you know, we live in a media-driven society that grabs your headlines with action-packed words. You know, it's just not somebody was ran over, he was crushed by that car or something. You know, they want to get you in, and we really, really have to fight that tendency, because that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. It's knee-jerk reactions to things that may or may not be out there. And you said a phantom. I pray that this is a phantom. And you know, parents are watching. This is a hot button issue, as we've seen. So we have to be very careful and pull back and make sure we think through all of this, all the ramifications. But just as a point, like I said, I would feel more comfortable. I think autonomy is a little bit better word than control. Carries a little bit better meaning, because that's where we are. Okay. That's all.
I'd love to wrap this conversation. We're able to talk and make the voices heard. Very passionate. Love to hear people's passion and your thoughts, but there's also logic too. I like to bring logic and facts. I have to hear people, you know, have substance to their emotions. But you should speak your emotions. I think emotions are good. Our schools, I hear the schools are indoctrination camps. They are. It could be good indoctrination, it could be bad indoctrination. It shapes the way people think, it shapes the way kids think. So they're indoctrinating kids. The question is with what? You know, and that's the part that people are debating. What are they indoctrinating our kids with? And that can be hashed out. Florida and their governors, legislators, they passed certain similar laws, maybe more extreme, but you don't see I don't think we have to fear, even if this is passed, who knows if it's gonna pass or not, but there's not a fallout in the state of Florida of teachers dropping, LGBTQ or racist things, going on. Now, some people may question it, but you can debate it. It's debatable. How are the kids doing? We'll see. They're like in the forefront of being at least monitoring what's being taught to our kids. Some people, I feel like there should be boundaries. I don't feel like teachers have a free reign and it should be just open. And, if we're not doing something in our district, we have nothing to fear. When there's laws saying, to be 16 to drive and 21 to drink, we respect that. Now, some people may argue it, well, my kids can drive, they're 12. Well, but the law says 16. So we respect that. But some parents may let their kids drive. That's fine. You can't drink till you're 21, you let your kid drink at 18, you're fine. That's between you and the kid. I think what I teach my kid should be for me, and there's certain things I don't want to talk to my kid. And how do you balance that out in Gahanna? Because we're a divided city. I'm not going to get into the political makeup, but we're divided. You guys in leadership, you have the ability to bring us together, you have the ability to separate us. That's your choice. People create laws and leadership, bylaws. Not everything is explained. I've been in that position where I've seen bylaws and laws written by our district and the definition is not explained. Now we have on the side, you're not liking these guys, or people write these bills because things are not explained. I think they're vague. They're probably vague for a reason. But now you're feeling what we felt when things are written and definitions were given and things weren't explained. And people were frustrated and emotional. So that's just the way our society is, I guess. For me personally, I didn't see, maybe I didn't read it differently, but I didn't see attack on the LGBTQ community. But if they feel like it is an attack on it, right, they should voice their opinion. I saw more of a protective blanket. I'd say there's a limit to how far you can go, but it wasn't explained where that limit is. But I think they're saying there's a limit. We want to just make sure it doesn't go beyond that for all of Ohioans. But they were vague, so who knows what that means? Lastly, most research agrees that a kid's brain, a person's brain is not mature enough to make life-changing decisions until they're 25 years old. So, when you push certain things on kids and certain ideologies on kids, like their brains are taking it in, but they're still not mature enough to take that information and really rationalize it. We can't have a kid-led society. We are adults. We tested and tried our belief system. So we have to have oversight also over our kids and the intent of teachers, the intent of society and to the peers, so we can keep them in the balance that we feel and maybe help them grow to become the people they're made to be. I'll stop there, but thank you for allowing me to speak.
One last comment.
I have a pretty loud
think you've
voice,
got a
so as
couple
long as everyone can hear me, I
Oh,
don't think
yeah.
I'm
All
gonna-
right.
Yeah.
So,
Three more.
three last. All right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Most people can hear me.
I need
You don't become a theater mom by being quiet. What I have to say has to do with some of the discussion about K-3. My daughter was not coached by a student, by a teacher, was not coached by me, and became very clear to me when she was in kindergarten that she was non-binary, that she identified as being interested in girls, even though she was a girl, but she wanted to wear clothing that was not what people would call girls' clothes. And this came up in the Q&U wedding, because the girls were being given little flowers, paper flowers to wear, and the boys were getting paper ties, not tires. That would be really interesting to see them wearing paper tires. And the teacher granted her wish and let her wear a tie. And I'm grateful for that. I can guarantee you that throughout, she is a senior now at the high school. I can guarantee you that throughout K through 3, she was not told anything about gay people. She was not encouraged to live this choice or lifestyle. In fact, she was harassed in the bathrooms by her peers on a regular basis in middle school and in elementary school, with very little support from the teachers and from the administration. In fact, the last time I remember her bringing it up to me, she was in 8th grade and said she had walked into the bathroom. Mind you, these are people she had been in school with, most of them, since she was in kindergarten, because we've been here the whole time that the kids have been in school. That a 6th grader walked into the girls' bathroom, when she walked in, screamed, "There's a boy in the girls' bathroom," and ran out. And rather than anybody addressing that a girl could be dressed in what is apparently boys' clothes and also knows which bathroom to go into, the teacher, a teacher stuck her head into the school bathroom and said, "If there's a boy in here, please leave." At that point, she stopped using the bathroom at school. And as a former nurse, I can tell you that a child who has to monitor what they eat, what they drink, to be able to hold it for an entire school day without having to use a public bathroom, so they leave home at whatever time and come home at a later time in order to be able to use the bathroom, is not focused on learning. And when I say that I believe that the schools in the public schools in Ohio, the Constitution in the state of Ohio says that public schools have to educate all of our students. That includes my daughter, my non-binary daughter. And she goes by she goes by they, she goes by he. She doesn't, you know, it changes. She is who she is, and she has been who she is since she was in kindergarten. And you can look at me like that, Tony, and think that I'm a poor parent, and I don't care.
I didn't say anything. I respect you.
She has the right to her pronouns, and she has the right to her kind of dress. And I think she has the right to have a teacher stand up to the other students and say, you know, it's okay if she wants to wear those clothes. And I think this bill, 616 particularly, but 322 and 327 are harmful to children. I think they're harmful to students. I think they're harmful to our community. And I'm very, very proud and extremely, obviously passionately supportive of this board for taking a stance for kids who are otherwise marginalized, who would be not seen, not heard, and not represented in education in any way. Thank you.
Experience.
Did you want to respond?
No.
We've got to have
the chair
control the conversation.
Let me reset 2 more
Yeah.
We said 2 more.
and go ahead.
I have been, can you hear me?
No.
I've been a public educator for over 48 years in spite of my youthful appearance. Currently, I am still working with an educational foundation, and I'm a licensed practicing professional counselor. You name it, I've seen it. And I want you to know, I'm so proud of this resolution because I personally dealt with so many of these issues. And this kind of legislation is toxic and harmful in the way it approaches, the way we think about schools, think about families, and think about community. And I am so happy that this board is putting together a resolution as it's written that includes all of these different components, because I think each component has a place in it and needs to be included for the best interest of all the students within our school. Our diversity is our richness. I've been in Gahanna since 2007, and I moved here because of the diversity. And I happen to know that I have never, ever seen anything taught in any curriculum that would be inappropriate or even close to being reflected in anything that's in this legislation. It is just such a disturbing situation we're living through, knowing that we have to be out here defending things that aren't even existing in what we teach kids. And I also want you to understand that I am a daughter of a government social studies teacher and an immigrant. And I am also a proud mayor of Woolsey City from Girl State. And also a two-term school board member from my local home community. I've been doing this for more than 2 weeks. And this kind of resolution will make a huge impact on the way all students with all points of view are included and accepted, and without, that is not indoctrination, that is dialogue. And we need to make certain that we protect everybody, and thank you so much for your hard work on reviewing so well the legislation, addressing it as appropriate for a local school board, addressing it into a resolution that is clear on our position that affects our wonderful students, as this precious young person stood up and was so proud of being who he is and all of the different points of view I totally respect. I just want to thank the board for making it clear that we're here for all kids and that the legislation out there is not close to being representative of what goes on in any school. And I've been in a lot of them. Rural schools, inner city schools, public schools. If I say more schools, you'll think I'm really old. But I want you to know that this does not happen, and I'm grateful for this clarification and this resolution making that clear. Thank you.
I will say, as a teacher, I wish our students could see what you put forth tonight, which is open dialogue in many ways, civil conversations with different ranges. So I wish our kids could see it and model it in their own ways. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Wagner, and I'm finishing my 14th year as a teacher at Anglican High School, where I serve as the chair for the English department. I'm also a proud resident of this district, and I'm also a proud product of this district. I went K-12 to Gamma schools from Royal Manor to West to the high school where I now teach. I walked the same hallways, rode the same buses, sat in the same bleachers, ate in the same cafeteria as many of your students. I bleed blue and gold. So it's difficult for me to say that my district failed me in some respects as a student, because I'm also a gay man. Growing up, I didn't see myself presented in any of my buildings. I never saw myself on a single book, on a single shelf, in a single room in any of those buildings. I never saw work problems that had families that I hoped to someday would look like mine. I was never educated on how to have safe relationships as a gay man in health classes. I never heard a staff member say the word gay, let alone identify as one in 13 years in this district. Representation didn't exist in my daily life growing up. Long gone from this space that I called home, I was 20 years old before I was assigned a book to read that had a gay character. I was 22 years old before a professor in front of my classroom said that they were gay. 20 years where not a single character on a single page of text looked or thought or celebrated who they were like me. Visibility and representation weren't an option. I'd like to say that those facts didn't impact me. I'd like to tell you that there wasn't an inherent shame, no lasting impact on me being safely and confidently who I am. I'd like to say that, but I can't. I've been recognized at the local and state and national level of my profession for my work as an educator, but even then I lacked the confidence to feel like it was okay to be me in these hallways. While I'd been out in my private life since I was 16, I didn't tell my department that I was gay for the first 4 years that I was back as a teacher. These are people I ate lunch with daily, went to their weddings, held their children, had dinners at their houses. I was 36 before I felt safe enough to say that I was gay in a professional job interview with district leadership, with people I had discussed educational policy with, made decisions with as a leader in the school system that impacted the lives of many students. I was 37 before I even mentioned that I was gay in front of my classroom. I'm 38 now. School was not a safe place to be visible here. Lack of representation and visibility did in fact have an impact. That has changed. The district has begun to make a space and time for LGBT+ students some of whom I hope come back to this district and teach someday. We see diverse families and word problems, text with LGBT plus characters available to students out and proud and thriving queer students in leadership positions, leading sports teams, and finding first crushes in those same hallways, same cafeterias where I was once afraid. So, just last week, for the first time in my 38 years, I heard a building leader in an announcement not only acknowledge the violence against my LGBT plus brethren, but also insist that we as a community do better. I got choked up, a grown adult, at an announcement. Lack of representation has had an impact on me. Bills like SB 616 don't work to prevent children from being gay. It only delays them from seeing themselves as worthy of having space in this community. It only works to make it okay to others to marginalize, to silence. It only works to embolden those who bully by saying that there's something wrong about the fact that when I put my head down on a pillow at the end of the night, it happens to be next to a man. I don't have to read the stats to you. We all know that LGBT plus youth are vastly more likely to make attempts at their lives because of feelings like shame, embarrassment, and isolation. Anyone in education who feels that this bill will do anything but increase those numbers does not have our students' best interest in mind. Your resolution ensures that the lack of representation doesn't have to impact others, and I applaud you for that. Your stance is clear and on the right side of this. For the thousands of students in our district who won't have to someday say that they never saw themselves in this space, I thank you for your bravery and resolve. I thank you for your time and energy in putting forward and for being the type of leaders this is.
All right, we have said that that's it. Thank you very much for sharing.
My name was called.
I actually am the chair of this meeting, and I don't know.
I'm here to say something.
Whatever, it's up to you, doesn't mean.
All right, I think brevity, go ahead, brevity. Like, there are people that didn't speak through this whole meeting, and like, you're speaking multiple times, so I just think brevity, go ahead, brevity.
No, I'm just saying, hope you know me, I love everyone, but when I'm in this room, I'm the only black man here. And you don't know what it feels like, right? And I have my personal views, I have my life experience, but I've never expressed any anger towards anyone here, regardless of their sexual orientation, the color of their skin, their religion, anything. Nobody can accuse me of that personally, but I just feel like we could do better. Better. And it's non-political, it's walking love towards everyone and accepting everyone. If it's not being taught in our schools, just if this is passed, which it may not, because it shouldn't even be an issue. But I love you, I love everyone, and
positive.
please do not
Appreciate it.
accuse me of anything other than that. That's
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So one thing I just really quickly need to say is, I think that it is very interesting that in the state of Ohio, thus far, we have chosen to not have academic standards set in the area of health. And this would be a really appropriate type of dialogue to have if this state ever made a decision to set academic standards in the area of health. Because we don't have those standards set and we have never gone through a process of setting those standards, some of this dialogue has not been had. That is not something that is within the purview of this school board, but that is something that is within the purview of our legislature. And had they asked for that dialogue to occur, or even been open to that dialogue occurring, because it has been requested on a number of occasions. I think some of this dialogue that is trying to be had under the purview of this legislation would have been more appropriately had, and still could be for that matter.
Wrap it up.
I think you have one person.
I
who
just,
hasn't-
I mean, it's not a
Go ahead,
question. I just
go ahead,
wanted
go
to
ahead,
give
go
me a
ahead,
chance
go
to share just for a minute. I wanted to let everyone just be aware. So my two children that are in middle school and both, so I have an 8th grader and a 6th grader, and both of them in 6th grade ELA as a class did a book club where, I mean, I guess I could have opted them out, but I chose not to, on the book Slob. And if you've read the book, it's a character who carries extra weight and is being bullied. The main character's sister, though, is part of a group that's called GWAB, Girls Who Are Boys. And so it's a club of girls who dress like boys and have boys' names. So it is, I mean, both of my daughters, I own the book. It is in my basement because I'm done reading it, and I'm gonna save it for my next 6th grader, so I don't have to buy it again. But that book is being read as a class in 6th grade ELA. Just making that aware.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, there's a difference between teaching curriculum.
I'm well aware of
Could
that,
she
but
finish?
it
Let her
is being
finish.
discussed. And so when you're saying it's not being discussed,
Absolutely,
I also,
yeah, it is
I
being
mean,
discussed.
my children have friends who have both moms. And yes, as a family, we choose to talk about that, and it's talked about at school. And from my understanding, from what I've read of the bill, I personally don't think it's going to make those conversations not be allowed. I could be wrong, but if you're in the kindergarten and you bring your class picture in, or you're sitting around circle time and you say, what did you do this weekend? And you say, my 2 daddies and I went to the zoo. Okay. I don't think we need to make a big deal about it.
The legislation would permit it.
Yeah, would allow it. Would allow it.
So I'm
So-
just saying from my experience, it
All right,
is.
all right, all right. So
So
we have
next
another
steps,
meeting
we
that's
have to talk
following.
about next steps before we do that.
You have to what?
Talk about
Next
next steps for the resolution before we close this meeting.
Okay. All
Because
right.
we haven't
done that.
figured out what we're doing with the resolution at this point, or have we voted on it?
All right. So thank you, everyone, for
We're not,
who's leaving.
we're
Some
not, you're
people are
welcome to go, but we're still having a meeting. So I think that there was a request to consider adding an additional paragraph. I can try to work on something and circulate that. You would have to talk about it again before we vote on it. We
Okay.
have another meeting on Thursday. We have a student learning and achievement committee meeting. I mean, I'm happy to try to modify.
Does that give
Whoa.
you enough time?
Sure.
She doesn't sleep.
So we could bring it, we could add it for discussion again on Thursday.
Let me ask your opinion and everyone's opinion. Are you? I like it as is. I love it as is. And
I would say
If
let her
you-
try to draft something and we can, doesn't mean we have to include it. I
Okay,
mean, it gives us time to all kind of
All right.
ponder it.
thank you.
That's
All
not
right,
that's not a problem.
all right. Well, I want to thank everyone who
We
shared.
still have to figure out what we do after that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So in order for us to vote on it, so Thursday is not a board meeting. We can't vote on it on
Oh, okay.
We
Thursday.
have to move it to.
So the next meeting that we have is on Saturday,
Oh,
Okay.
30th.
the 30th.
But it's not, it's not open.
It is an open public meeting. We have executive session right now as part of that agenda. We
Got
could add to
Got
the
it.
agenda if we wanted to.
The next full board meeting is the 17th.
Yeah, I personally would not want to wait all the way
ASAP.
until May 17th.
ASAP.
Yeah,
30th?
I can reach out to Kimberly and Jill about adding it to the agenda. for
So if we,
discussion.
it wouldn't be added, so, okay, added for discussion on Thursday, and then I guess we can figure out what to do with it from there.
You're right.
If we were going to add it to an agenda to vote on Saturday, we would have to update the notice, because right now the notice says that the only purpose of the meeting.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
It's
Bye.
not okay. Yeah, it's not okay. It's not okay.
What? Okay, we're good.
So wait a minute.
We're gonna do the 30th on the agenda for the 30th. Does that work?
To vote on the 30th.
Yes.
So, Mr. Gooding, are you able to, we have enough time to update the notice of the special meeting for the 30th?
Tuesday,
Can we-
just 24
Tuesday,
hours,
use
right?
for purpose? And
Can't remember what day it is, but I'm pretty sure.
I'm with you, Sue. I'm with you.
Today, we have a meeting.
we're supposed to be meeting.
On Saturday, I saw that. I think it was,
When is our next meeting after the 30th? But it's to do stakeholder interviews for.
The 4th, we have,
Yeah, that's not a good time. We have.
oh, right.
Yeah.
The 6th,
Why
the
can't we do the
4th,
30th?
special. Yeah, the 30th.
We can't, but we're currently set to meet over in the central office. We have to change the location.
We could change the location. Let's make
I
it
think it's available. I mean, we intentionally set it across the street so that we didn't have to have staff open this building.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Send your invoice.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
all right.
Right, treasurer?
Got
It's worth it.
So it sounds like we will be discussing it again on Thursday with a possible vote on the resolution on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock is when our special board meeting is scheduled. Just to be clear, Saturday's meeting will be here.
All right. So again, I want to thank everyone for their participation and
Yeah, the board also has a special board. Do you want to
we're going to say that the board has a special board meeting
tonight?
tonight, following this. And we are going to adjourn. So we will look forward to seeing you. Global Scholars is on Saturday with
Thursday.
Thursday. Student Learning Achievement. Student Learning Achievement. So come see Global Scholars, phenomenal projects, and welcome to keep you posted. It will